This is the first time I've done one for a while. Can you hear us okay? You right? Good, good. So I am joined today by Joshua M. Patten of Comic Book Resources, or CBR fame. And we are going to be talking an awful lot about Star Trek. And as Joshua is a self-proclaimed, why don't you just call yourself a second ago a Kurtzman shill?
Yeah, known Kurtzman shill is what I've been called on sites like Reddit.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm loved on Reddit as well. I mean, that really is. I think it's the Twitter for even people that are even more unpleasant than Twitter.
They need more. They need more words to be unpleasant.
Yeah, to be unkind to each other. But anyway, you're joining us today because you've actually written a bit of a history of Star Trek and Star Wars. We did a live review last week where we concentrate more on Star Wars. Do you want 2 seconds just to sell your?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I sell such an ugly word in a future where we don't use money anymore. But no, the book is Divided Allegiance: The Third Waves of Star Wars and Star Trek. I was a political reporter for most of my career, covering American politics, criminal justice, all the stuff that obviously makes you angry and upset and is not a lot of fun. But any chance I got, I would cover, I'd write about Star Wars, Star Trek, entertainment stuff that I loved. I left that political stuff behind in 2017. I'm sure you can all do the math and guess why that was, which is also the year Star Trek came back. And so I was able to write about the first season of Discovery and have been pretty much, the rise of the third wave of Star Trek has been pretty much parallel with my journey is becoming a full-time critic and entertainment writing, analysis, lit crit, whatever you want to call it. And so I collected all of my writing over the past 15 years into an ebook called Sword, Spaceships, and Superheroes, the essays and criticism from the golden age of television. But if I put it in paperback, it would have been longer than all but one of the Game of Thrones books. So that's why we're splitting it up into like Star Wars, Star Trek. There's going to be a superhero one coming out later on in the year. And then maybe by Christmas we'll have, so for people who don't like ebooks, you can get the paperbacks. If you don't like, if you love ebooks, you can get a lot more than just Star Wars and Star Trek. All of it on my Amazon author page.
Well, you very kindly sent us a copy, which I've been plowing through for the last week or so.
What a brave man.
Well, I can barely read, so it was tough work. But I just want to kick off by sort of talking about the original series movies, because that's where your book really starts, is talking about your you actually say that Undiscovered Country is kind of your favorite or the best of the collection. I mean, you just mentioned Star Trek 5 actually, which is controversial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've never met a Star Trek I didn't like. And when I was talking with Harris on last week in the live, I talked about my first movie memory being seeing Return of the Jedi. My second is walking into the Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. And we all know that opens with the scene from Wrath of Khan where Spock dies, which, by the way, to 4 or 5-year-old me, that was news to me. I was like, I'm sorry, what? What happened to Spock? I didn't realize this was the search we were undertaking. But yeah,
I just thought he'd wandered off.
I thought maybe he didn't show up. He's a Vulcan. He's got stuff to do. But I think the movie that is like the most perfect, insofar as you could use such a term to describe art, is The Undiscovered Country, because the original series was so baked into the Cold War in the late 60s, and the fact that the original series crew's time as the main movie Star Trek cast was ending as the Cold War was over, and the story that they ended up telling about making peace with the Klingons, which again had already sort of been established a couple years earlier in TNG, I thought was just brilliant, and there's actually a CBR article I wrote a couple years back about or maybe even a year or more, but about the original opening. Like, it was going to be bad. Like, it was going to have Sulu driving a taxi. Uhura was going to be hosting like a radio call-in show. Like, none of them were going to be in Starfleet anymore. And then they were going to have to be like roped back in to do this final mission.
I've not heard that before. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, but they didn't have the budget for it, so they just said, all right, well, we'll start with them on the ship. And oh, thank heavens, because boy, does that work so much better as like, it's one last mission, and that's what it is. And I just, I also have very fond memories of seeing both 5 and 6 with my mom, who was an original Star Trek fan. Watched it when it was on TV in the 60s. I mean, I think she even wrote a letter to NBC to save it from cancellation. So I literally do not remember a time before I was a Star Trek fan. Like, I was a Star Trek fan before I have memories.
I've told the story before, but I love Undiscovered Country primarily because it was the first one I ever saw at the cinema. And I was about 14 or something. I actually snuck out of school in my school uniform and sat at the back, like pretending I wasn't there. And
my mom took me out of school. We got out to go see a matinee. Like, it was a doctor's appointment.
My mom wasn't that cool. So Undiscovered Country. But I think the best film for me is actually Khan. I actually think that sort of the whole bit in the prison for me is in Undiscovered Country is not amazing. I find that, and the end speech is a bit cheesy, but then the end bit when Sulu goes flying off in the Excelsior and they go, we'll go to the second star to the left until morning, sort of thing. I was like, that is such a beautiful way of ending that series of movies. And I'm with you. I don't think people used to joke with you that it's like alternate movies were bad with Star Trek, and I don't agree. I even like Star Trek 5. I might have not when I was a bit younger, but now I watch back in it and I look at it now and I'm like, all right, the God bit's a bit cheeky or a bit cheesy, but the whole line when it comes in, oh, excuse me, why does God need a spaceship? I'm just like, that's just brilliant.
That there is no more Star Trek line than what does God need with a starship? Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but the Leonard Nimoy bit when Cybok is talking to him and Leonard Nimoy has a bit, that is Oscar-winning acting. I mean, Leonard Nimoy, he was such a good actor.
I mean, DeForest Kelly with the dad thing. I mean, and I'll tell you what, I think that is, again, best. When I use the word best, it just means like sort of my favorite of this thing.
That's all we can do, really, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think the best friendship story between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy is Star Trek 5. I mean, because Cybok does that thing. He gets McCoy. I'm still not 100% sure if he gets Spock. He doesn't get Kirk, and instead of going with him like everyone else, Bones and Spock are like, no, we're staying with our friend. And I mean, if we talk about it too long, I could cry.
Well, I mean, the opening sequence up the mountain and everything as well, that again reiterates what you're talking about, because
I still call them marshmallows.
Yeah. Well, they're singing their little song over the campfire. It's just, it's great. I love all of the original series movies. I love all the TNG movies. People moan about I don't love Insurrection as much, to be fair. That is the weakest out of
the two. I feel like Nemesis is my least favorite.
I love Nemesis. Absolutely love it. I think the battle sequence is brilliant. I think Tom Hardy's brilliant. I love Nemesis.
Yeah,
I love the scimitar. That's the thing now. But I'm in the minority on that. I didn't realize people disliked it.
It's not that it's not that dislike is such a strong word. It's just it is my least favorite. Like Insurrection had a like episode feel to it in a way.
Not more like a double episode than
and I think there's a part of that I think is why that one. I mean, again, would I say that I love either of them? Again, such strong words. But yeah, Nemesis, I don't know. Maybe it's lingering resentment that it killed the movie franchise. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't love Generations when it came out. I thought it was weak, but then I look back on it since, and I'm like, no, this is great. And I tell you what, First Contact is still probably my favorite Star Trek movie ever.
It's up there. It's really up there. First Contact is like just the look of it. I mean, Frakes' direction. Yeah. And if you've never watched the First Contact commentary that is just Jonathan Frakes talking, I mean, I imagine that's what it's like to hang out with him, listening to him do the commentary.
He is a Trek nerd. Yeah, he loves it. But I love that film mainly though because it was before the period of sort of like leaks and everything was on it. And actually in the trailer they put in the D. So, I mean, we didn't know. We just assumed they were going to be in a new Galaxy class. We didn't know. And then I actually watched, I went to a Trekathon. Right? So it was all the movies back to back overnight. And I have to admit, I fell asleep for Star Trek 5. I will admit, at like 4 a.m. But then they showed...
It's entrapment.
Yeah, it was. They gave us breakfast. And then in the morning, they showed us First Contact. And we didn't know about the Sovereign. Nobody knew. So when the Sovereign appeared and they did that sweep and shot as it turns, there was and I'm British. This is a massive expression of emotion for us.
Yeah.
We all together. We all went, ugh.
Well done.
And for us, that's just like running around going, like an airplane or something. Like that's amazing. But you could hear audible. Everyone gasped. You know, it's just like I love that movie. But let's talk about New Trek a little bit.
Sure. As we shift into that, let's just point out the fact that like I think that Star Trek being such a generational franchise, I think that the pattern is already starting to develop in how we're talking about it. That Star Trek ages well. The Star Trek that maybe you didn't like at first, a couple years later, you go back to it and you go, oh, that's not that bad. You know, the stuff that the flaws are kind of dull. The things that shine, the things that were brighter shine more brightly. Yeah. I think that's how this thing sort of works, you know, especially when our expectations get out of the way.
Enterprise. And we'll talk about that because that's what makes me think about that.
It's been a long road.
Well, I'm getting from there to here, baby.
Yeah.
But I didn't love Enterprise when it came out. I still watched it. It's a bit like I'm a massive Stargate fan as well.
Yeah.
And when SGU came out, I didn't love it. But like Enterprise, I went back and watched it later, and I'm like, I didn't appreciate this. Scott Bakula or Bakula, sorry, I always think it was Bakula, like Dracula.
Yeah.
It's just when he was cast, I was like, that's genius. This is going to be awesome. And I didn't love the time Cold War thing. I thought that ruined it for me. I think it should have been focused on the Federation forming for me.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I have a different relationship with Enterprise, and I think this sort of colored the way that I approached the return of Star Trek because now Star Wars 1983, that's all I got for so many years, but with the Star Trek movies, then TNG, then we had DS9, we had 2 Star Trek shows a week. And then through Voyager, and then when Enterprise happened, I was going off into the Army, going off to college. I was like, I'll catch the next one. I'll catch the next show. I mean, Enterprise sounds great, but I'll catch the next one. And there was no next one. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I took this for granted. I thought that nothing could take Star Trek away. Yeah. And things can take Star Trek away. And now that I'm
later.
Yeah, we will. Now that I've, since I've one of the first books I got, I still have it always close by, is The Making of Star Trek by Stephen Whitfield and with Gene Roddenberry. And
my copy's over there. I won't run off to get it, but my copy's over there.
And then since then, I've gotten the Bob Justman Herb Solo book. I got I have the Edward Gross Mark Altman books. I mean, I have consumed Trek history and the stuff. And the more I learn about it, the more I learned like how much it defied the odds. And I will say, I understand your feeling about the time Cold War. And I think, Rick Berman and Brandon Braga would agree with you. They wanted to just do a straight up prequel. And it was network notes that were like, you need to give him the Time War, something to make it snappy. And I do think it was retroactively brilliant in a way, because it did create this thing that, and we can get into this a little more later into the talk about New Trek, but I think that adding this time Cold War thing changes sort of the chronological order of the shows and makes release order the appropriate way to watch them, because that is the history, you know. And I that is how, if there's ever any canon thing or technological thing that I brush up against, like the holograms on the Discovery One first season, their little hologram communications, I just chalk that up to Chekhov leaving those Klingon communicators with the on the sub, and you know, Voyager accidentally creating the internet age by sending back that time ship. You know, like the idea that time changes, you know, the canon. Is it the prime timeline? Is it a different timeline? I say who cares, but you know,
there's a big argument to say that all of Kurtzman Trek is a different timeline, and depending on how you, because Star Trek messes with how time works.
Absolutely. And hey, if that allows you to have fun with it, rock and roll. I'm with you. It's the Kurtzman verse, the Kurtz verse. You know, if that lets you have fun with it, enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like,
I've called it the Kurtz verse once or twice.
Because Lower Decks, not to jump ahead, but Lower Decks gave us an infinite Star Trek multiverse, and in an infinite Star Trek multiverse, that means that there is a world or a branch reality where everyone's headcanon is canon, and everyone's fan fiction is canon. And you know, you can imagine that every episode takes place in a different reality, or you can pick and choose. And you know, I mean, I think I'm fine with that. You know, I don't care what timeline is what, as long as everyone's having fun.
Well, remind me to put my slant on that when we talk about the Kurtzman era.
Sure.
I got a different, more cynical point of view on that. But,
but I will say one last thing on the Enterprise point before you pick up is just that Enterprise I don't think Enterprise failed. Like, especially if you look at season 4 with Manny Koto, like it was really starting to hit what fans wanted.
Viewing figures had gone up for season 5.
It was always the highest rated show on UPN. It just wasn't high enough for UPN to charge the advertising rates they needed to justify the budget. I mean, UPN was shedding affiliates. Again, I wrote for CBR, there's an article, Enterprise didn't fail, UPN did. And that is why Enterprise got canceled.
Well,
it's because
we kind of suffered a similar fate.
Yes.
I do wonder if, I thought they should have brought in the Enterprise refit after the Xindi conflict. I would have thought there was perfect timing to do it then, and they didn't. And I always thought that was a waste. But anyway, I've got a statement for you then based on the TNG, Voyager, DS9, Enterprise. So I was still on that.
Yeah.
And see if you agree. My statement is Deep Space Nine is the best of those shows. Your opinion?
I mean, it's so funny because I first got online in 1994. I actually got the America Online had these like sections where you could go for like, you know, sports and money, and there was a teen section, and an aspiring writer, they were asking people to write for their teen section, and I was like, hey, I'm a teenager, I'll give you the real skinny on being a teenager. and I got it was so corny. I found an old floppy disk of those things, and I think I did pretty good for a 14, 15-year-old, but it was absolutely cheesy. But it ended up getting me free America Online, unlimited, before that was even really a billing option. So I was online all the time, and that is where I discovered Star Trek Fandom Online. It was the first thing that I found. And it's funny, as you know, as someone who was just getting into DS9 because Jake Sisko, kid like me, wanted to be a writer. I didn't really. DS9 was a little too weird at first. I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. But by like season 2, season 3,
first 2
started
seasons,
getting into it. And then I go on these Star Trek forums, and I see these people saying it's not Star Trek, good sci-fi, not Star Trek. I saw people calling. I saw people calling Sisko and later Janeway the affirmative action captains, which is an American policy that we had.
We still get now, unfortunately.
Now, I didn't know that was an insult at the time, because I was like, oh yeah, affirmative action, that's a thing that we have.
That's a good thing.
And I remember that people really didn't like DS9, and then the deep people who did like DS9 really didn't like Voyager. And now Janeway's my girl. I love Janeway. If I had to pick a favorite captain, gun to the phaser to the head, it's gonna be Janeway, because I mean,
yeah, I would probably be with you on that as well. Their character is more rounded and more interesting than all the others.
Yeah, and just, you know, the way, like, I love the fact that she was the only one. She really did what we were promised with TOS. She didn't have any admirals to turn to, no Starfleet command. It was just her. Yeah. Laxus. I mean, favorite. Yeah, Captain Janeway. Catherine Janeway.
I'm going to go with Janeway. I think Janeway as well, because of the situation she was put in. It made for more extreme sort of scenarios, whatever, that showed more of a sort of personality. When we didn't really see a lot of things going terribly wrong before that. I mean, I think my favorite episode is probably In the Pale Moonlight. That's right.
Yes.
I feel like I'm getting it wrong. I just only put them because there's a song in The Pale Moonlight as well, so I panicked for a second. Sisko in that is, and Avery Brooks's portrayal of that is phenomenally good. So that might be my favorite. But as a whole, I think it's Janeway. And but because of the scenario she put in, I like it when things went wrong and she made tough decisions, sort of thing. And you know, there's a list about like how many people did Janeway murder over there?
War crimes, Janeway's war crimes.
Yeah, I think Sisko committed a few as well, to be fair. But
I mean, but I will say that I do think DS9 did something very important, because again, we think of Star Trek now as this wide, expansive thing that possesses all kinds of stories that it can tell. And when DS9 came out, Star Trek was a show about a ship called Enterprise, where they went to a strange new world, beamed down, met an alien, became friends with it or killed it, and then moved on. And DS9 is the one that most pushed the limits of what Star Trek could be or was. And that is important to keeping it going. You know, I think part of the reason Enterprise suffered is that the first 2 seasons, which don't get nearly enough credit, but people were like, oh, just another ship show. You know, they go to a planet, they land on the planet, stuff goes sideways.
Remember what they moaned about Deep Space Nine, though? Because why isn't it a ship?
Why? We have to stay here the whole time? Oh.
It only really got good when the client came into
Remember the people didn't like Cardassian design. They didn't like the way the tech looked. No. They're like, that's not what it's supposed to look like. Where's the acutograms? Which, not nothing. I love me an acutigram. Don't get me wrong.
No. And like I say, I've seen a few comments in the chat, sort of people saying that, oh, you're joking, Picard and Sisko are better. But and don't get me wrong. That was my point really about Sisko, is there's bits of Sisko, bits of Picard, bits of, like the best of both worlds. Picard in that, his character in that is just amazing. But I feel like the TNG, we never saw, other than the Borg episodes, we never really saw the Federation in trouble, sort of thing. In DS9, we really did. And then obviously Voyager was slightly different again, because just the ship was in trouble the whole time.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing about Star Trek. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that the thing to me between a good show and a great show, it's generally the villain. And TNG had the Borg. Voyager had the Borg as well, but 7462 and whatever, and they had 4 or 5 really good villains, other than the bloody ones from the start, which I've forgotten the name of.
Kazons. Oh, the poor Kazons with their hair.
No, not a fan. But Deep Space Nine with the Dominion was a brilliant villain, and they dragged it through. When the DS9 episodes were good, they were so good. But I tell you, my favorite episode of those, if I had to pick one, again, phaser to the head, I've got to pick one episode. Okay. It's an episode of Enterprise.
Ooh, which one?
Regenerations is probably the episode that I would pick. If I was only allowed to watch one episode of Star Trek again, it would probably be Regenerations. If I was allowed to watch 2, I might watch Best of Both Worlds back to back. But
remind me, Regenerations, which one was that?
It's the one that spins off from First Contact, when
the Borg. They find the Borg in the Arctic.
And then the Borg books off. Yeah, I love that episode. I just think it's brilliant from beginning to end, and I love how it's spun into First Contact, and I just love that episode. But
one of my favorite, like, timey-wimey episode, to borrow a phrase from a different 60-year-old sci-fi franchise, is maybe that one. I'm not a titles guy. I often don't remember titles, but it's the one where
I had to download it to watch it, so I remember the title. But,
it's the one where Archer gets he has the like thing where he forgets. It's the 51st. He gets the 51st dates disease, and like the Earth gets blown up, and they have to have the planet, and T'Pol and Phlox, like that whole episode. There's just something about it that I thought that was such a well done episode, and yeah, that's like the time one that I think really warms my heart. Now I have a question for you. Phaser to the head, best bad episode, like the best bad Star Trek episode. Because I'll be honest, there's a lot to choose from, but I think I'm gonna pick DS9, the stupid game, the Ala Moraine.
Oh yeah, no, I've got an even worse. Mine's TNG.
Okay.
And it's Where Crusher Bonks a Ghost. I do know the title and I've forgotten it.
Something about a candle.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I do know it. It's brought up quite a lot. Somebody in the comments.
Someone's got it. It's a legendary one.
An awful episode. It's always the one that jumps to mind whenever somebody says what's a really bad episode of stuff. Excluding New Trek, because I would obviously do Subspace.
Do you think Masks is a bad episode or a good episode? I found people are of two minds on that, because they go for it. Yeah, and the fact that he did it so soon after Fistful of Datas, he had to do all these characters. But I recently watched it like a while back, and I was just like, "What is this episode? What were they doing?"
No, I hate that one. The one where Deanna Troi gets cut up as a cake, and then
my god, the Data having dreams.
That's not a great episode either. I felt that the 7th season of TNG, they sort of they had a few episodes that was more for the cast and the thing than anything else, and the writers are allowed to play around a bit more, which you get quite a lot in series. Really, when they get to the 7th season, they're like, "We've got nothing to lose now. We can play with this a little bit." And there's a few episodes in there you to go, "This isn't good."
Sub Rosa, that's it.
Yeah, Sub Rosa.
Ghost era.
God, that's a terrible episode of. I should have remembered that because I've got a friend called Rosa. Anyway, it's a terrible episode of Star Trek.
Gates McFadden, excellent in it, but
But if you're doing 24, 25, 26 episodes, there's going to be some not great episodes in there. So I mean, you're not going to hit with everything. And then you got the odd episode, like I want to call it Conspiracy, but I'm not sure that's what it's called. Towards the end of the 1st season, with the aliens.
Oh, with that guy.
I think it was called Conspiracy.
I think that's right.
I think it was the only really episode in the 1st season I really loved. It was, for me, that was the episode that made me go. I was enjoying it. Don't get around watching Star Trek and that was the episode that made me go, I can't wait for this next episode. That was amazing. And I just love how Picard was like, "Ooh, evil, dead," rather than we should try and talk to him. But rather than being Star Trekky, they were just like, "Kill."
Yeah.
Which I'd like.
Absolutely relatable reaction. Yeah, also, shout out to James in the chat who talks about Warp 10 Lizards.
Warp 10 Lizards was not a good episode.
It was not. I mean, but here's the thing. I thought for sure Lower Decks was going to bring back the salamander babies, because they made it very clear.
Did eventually.
Did they?
I'm sure they did in the last season, didn't they? They joked about it once or twice. With
they joked about it. I thought they were actually going to show up, though.
They had mock-ups of the salamanders in one of the exhibitions. Was the salamanders? Yeah.
Yep.
That was terrible. But then there's no episode of this Lower Decks that's terrible. They're all brilliant. I love Lower Decks. But going into them, we could talk a little bit about New Trek.
Let's get into it.
As a Kurtzman shill, you love all of it.
I do. I inject it right into my veins.
Well, I mean, not so much. Discovery season 1.
Well, let's not skip over the movies, because the JJ movies.
We could talk about the JJ Abrams movies.
Yeah, because I think that leads
into New Trek.
I think it does lead into like sort of a lot of the aesthetic choices they made and a lot of the direction they go. And in the book, The Divided Allegiance, the Third Waves of Star Wars and Star Trek, available on Amazon now. I talk about how I feel like, and I think JJ even said this in like, I think,
don't flash it so quick. You're going to give somebody epilepsy.
Yeah.
Let's give it 3. Warning. All right, beat it 3.
But I think there was some interview. I want to say maybe like Stephen Colbert, maybe Jon Stewart, where JJ Abrams admits he's like, I was more of a Star Wars guy than a Star Trek guy, and it's that is very evident in I think those first 2 movies that he was trying to Star Wars up Star Trek, which I think was absolutely the directive from Paramount, because I mean, you look at those first movies that we got. I mean, the legendary story is that after the motion picture, which another movie that I think does not get the credit it deserves. I mean,
unfortunately, they were trying to make 2001: A Space Odyssey for Star Trek.
Yeah, look, the introduction of the Enterprise with that Jerry Goldsmith score could have been 2 minutes longer for my money.
Yeah.
But I think that the what they wanted to do, after that $40 million, it was over budget. They brought in Harv Bennett, and the story goes that, I think it was one of those famous executive guys, maybe Katzenberg. I don't know.
Okay.
But one of them was like, he's like, can you make a Star Trek movie? And Harv Bennett was like, sure. And he's like, can you make it for under $40 million? And he's like, I can make 5 of them for that. And that's how those movies, that's why they were profitable. I mean, they made, I think like The Voyage Home is the most profitable Star Trek movie because it was, what it earned versus the budget. And none of these budgets were massive. I mean, part of the reason Nemesis and Insurrection failed, as it were, is because their budgets were maybe higher than a Star Trek, a middle, a 4 or 5, 3, 4 Star Trek movie series should be. And with this one, with JJ's 2009, then Into Darkness, which not, the Khan thing really sticks with me. Like, no, Benedict Cumberbatch, great actor, should not play a man named Khan Noonien Singh. You know what I mean? Beyond, Star Trek Beyond was my favorite of those 3 because it felt like it was an original story. It kind of had that episode feel, but all of them had these like $200 million budgets. And we Star Trek fans, we are mighty, we are passionate, but we are small in number. If we ever fight the Star Wars guys, they are going to win. They've just got us in numbers. We'll need some we'll need some good Starfleet tactics to win that battle. But I think that was the problem with those movies, is that Paramount said, make Star Trek Star Wars for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they tried to do. And, I've met people who that was their gateway to Star Trek. And they, they went back, watched the shows, and they're like, oh, they're different, but I like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And honestly, that, to me, that's a win.
Yeah.
Anything that gets more people in the club.
As a Trekkie, particularly at the time, I was still pretty hardcore Trekkie.
Yeah.
I can't say that as much now, but anyway, like I say, we'll come into that later. I came out of it going, I really enjoyed that. It was an action movie it was funny. I really liked the cast, but that was not Star Trek. And the main reason was I complained about all the things like they hinted that the Enterprise was now hydroelectric, and they tried to make it like a normal power station now, where you got the antimatter, then you got to boil water, and you got turbines and things. They seem to imply that, and I'm just like, that's just stupid. And then in the second one, they did then they did the warp transporters, and I'm just like,
the transwarp beaming. I was like, guys.
And then beam to the Klingon Empire in the second one. I'm just like,
my headcanon for those movies is that the Kelvin movies are movies about the original series cast that people see in the 25th century. Like, that's why you got Spock there. Like, they did the thing where like, oh, we got the actual guy. And so that's how I view them. I view them as like movies about, because, if you see a movie based on a true story, like there's that movie Argo by Ben Affleck, a great movie. The end bit where they're running through the airport and the Iranian military's chasing them didn't happen. They just got in the airport, got on the planes, effed off, and we're fine.
So you think the Abrams movies are like, what do they call it when it's a version of reality, but it's not quite?
Yeah, like a heightened reality, augmented reality, kind of based on a true story, hollow novel.
True story, but some of these events might not have happened.
Yeah,
sort of thing. Okay.
Inspired by true events.
Inspired, that's a good thing. That's a good way of putting stuff. Inspired by Star Trek. That's a good way of putting it.
Oh, Sarah, the Beastie Boys, though. The one
I love that
in
bit. There's only a bit
in Beyond, when the rah hits and they all start exploding. I'll be honest, I was like, yay, in the theater.
Yeah, no, that was and I just like how it goes, good song.
Yeah.
I like the song. It's like, no, that's good. I really liked the first one, and I thought the way they did it was beautiful, particularly the way they saw him as a kid, and we see it emerging. And obviously, there's the whole thing with him traveling in time through a black hole, and I did have to sort of go, yeah, that's not how black holes work, even a bit. So I did. You could have asked anybody, is this how black holes work? And they would have gone, no. But because one, it's not a flipping hole that you can move through. But anyway.
Well, I have bad news. If you go around the sun real fast, you also don't go back in time. Like, this is all pretend.
You can't go back in time. You could go forwards in time if you go fast. Well, you do technically go forwards in time if you go fast enough. But
yeah, I'm time traveling the slow way.
Yeah. Well, if you jump on a plane, you time travel, but it's like 0.0000.
One of my favorite things to talk about is how if we really could go light speed, you would arrive, or faster than light speed. You could look to like where you're going, and you'd already be there.
The Picard maneuver.
Yeah.
I like how if you actually traveled at the speed of light for a year, and then or near the speed of light for a year, and came back, the Earth would be 50 years on, or more than that. Actually, I think it might be 150 years. And I'm just like, yeah. Space travel is going to suck.
Yeah. There's a new thing I heard where there's some guy who won a Nobel Prize in 2011 for like proving the model of the universe. Just won another Nobel Prize for being like, oh, actually got it all wrong. Completely different. Time is just a function. I can't even explain it well enough, but it's like time isn't exactly real, which,
I'd love that. I'd love to do that. I've got a theory. I've won £1 million. A few years later, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Have another £1 million, please. Yes, you can.
You were so honest about it. Here's another $1 million.
A few years later, oh, we got it right first time. Another £1 million, please. I can't do that at work. The first season of Discovery, then we've teased it a couple of times.
Sure.
Obviously, that run off Kurtzman, who wrote. Did you write all three of the Abrams movies, or just two of them?
I think just two, because I think Simon Pegg
two, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think Simon Pegg jumped in for the third.
So I felt like he dragged through an awful lot from the Abrams movies into the series, and I think the biggest example of that is the Klingons.
Well, remember the Brian Fuller was the guy who started it. Brian Fuller, veteran of Voyager, he was developing Discovery for quite a while before they brought Kurtzman in. I mean, he ended up, I don't know. He spoke about it on, I think, the Decon Chamber with.
He had a different Enterprise and all sorts, didn't he? And he had.
And he had a lot. Like he actually said that he didn't want to do the Klingons. Again, it's I would love to either read or do the version of the like 50-year mission for this era of Trek, because there are some stories that are to be told. But I do think that I think Kurtzman came in for Discovery season 1, and he had to like work with what was there. Like I don't think he had a full of like slate, like be able to develop it the way he would given his like complete freedom. But I think that there were 3 mistakes made for that first season of Discovery. The first was the decision to make it so aesthetically different than Star Trek before. Now, I think they were doing that like Roddenberry did with TNG, because when Roddenberry started TNG, he was like, it is going to look completely different from the Star Trek of before. We want it to, it's going to be its own thing. It's going to be distinct. And that worked for 80 years later, but for 10 years or however many years before TOS, even though they're like, it's a cutting edge, bleeding edge science vessel, people just kind of weren't buying it. And then like the nacelles and just the aesthetics, I think that set things off kilter. I think the second problem was, the second problem, and I think the larger problem with Star Trek in general, is that they are doing what Star Trek has always done, making new types of making these new shows that have Star Trek elements, but also try to push the boundaries, expand, change things, which brings in new fans. That's why, your Voyager people don't love DS9 as much as your DS9 people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But because they lock them all behind Paramount Plus, because they're all behind this paywall, people aren't going to discover Star Trek like they have before. I mean, the reason there's a new generation of DS9, Enterprise, Voyager, TNG fans is because they were on Netflix and Amazon Prime for so long. People found them and were like, oh my goodness, you know, these shows are great. So in trying to like push the boundaries, but making it so that like only the people who are actively going to seek out Star Trek, you know, I think they sort of misjudged the way Star Trek fans react to every new Star Trek that has ever been since the original series.
Well,
I mean,
and we can remember canon as well, which is another issue. It's like we're nerds, so
well, my favorite, one of my favorite stories is that in the like 1972 or 3, people picketed NBC. We want more Star Trek. We want more Star Trek. And NBC was like, all right, we'll do an animated series. And that news broke. And they were like, kill the animated series. Don't make it a cartoon. And of course, people, to use one of my favorite slang terms, slagged off the animated series. But now people go back and they're like, oh my goodness, it's actually good. It's the only Star Trek to ever win an Emmy for storytelling.
I mean, I remember there was
also considered not canon.
TNG came out. Yeah, there was whole stories about people kicking off and writing in letters to Paramount or whatever it was at the time and saying that this isn't Star Trek. How dare you reboot this series and blah blah blah. And we still get that now when any TV series is sort of, they do any sort of soft reboot and then people will kick off. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, soft reboots, continuations, soft reboots, they do work. Okay, reimaginings, other than Battlestar Galactica, maybe don't tend to work that well. Yeah. But this was, but I think people kick off about DS9 and then grew to love it. People kicked off about Voyager, then grew to love it. I never grew to love Discovery. I always.
How many times have you watched it?
I haven't even watched all of it.
Well, there you go. I mean, look, I did my first rewatch ahead of the season 5. You know, and now you read in the book. I liked more about every season of Discovery than I didn't that I covered in there.
Yeah.
I did not I would watch an episode, and then I would, right before I would do my review, I would watch it again. And those are the only times I would see the episode. So ahead of season 5, I did my first proper Discovery rewatch. And it was so much better the second time around because, Jay, I'm telling you, Star Trek ages well. There will be things that annoyed you from season 1 that would not annoy you this time. And that gets to the third thing that I think Star Trek Discovery did wrong, that set things off, is that we should have known from the get-go, from the beginning, that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe. Because if you watch that first season, the foreshadowing of Lorca being the reason things are bad, immaculate. It's so clearly obvious in hindsight. But coming in as new fans, we're like, they don't understand Star Trek. This isn't how a captain acts. This isn't how a Starfleet crew acts. And you see how the crew is trying to be, adhere to Starfleet values, but they have this psychopath captain. And like, they didn't have to tell us his plan. They didn't have to be like, oh, hey, everyone, he's from the Mirrorverse and he wants to go kill the Emperor. He could have just been from the Mirrorverse and like trying to keep it secret. And we wouldn't, we could have bought the fact that like, oh, maybe he's trying to be good. That would, I think, would have worked great. If we would have thought that Lorca was trying to be good while being bad, I think that would have changed how people saw Discovery going in, and they would have understood the tonal dissonance with other Star Trek. I mean, because you compare it to even, maybe even Picard season 1 and 2, which also is kind of darker in its tone. Discovery season 1 is unique in that sort of tonal dissonance.
My problems with it were everything to do with the Klingons, the ships, the style.
I mean, that was a choice.
Culture. It was awful. I really found it. I didn't even find it. I found it creepy. So I really struggled with it. My main problem with Discovery, though, was always I didn't love the casting. I talked about this in a video I dropped yesterday. Basically, the difference between Discovery and Strange New Worlds isn't the storytelling, the writing, anything like that, because I actually think it's similar in both. The casting for Strange New Worlds is perfect. The casting for Discovery, I didn't like. And my point was, in Strange New Worlds, I care about these characters. I'm rooting for them. in Discovery couldn't care less. And it's not that they're bad actors, because they're not. And Michael Burnham, I forget her name, was
Sneakwa Martin Green.
Yeah, so she's a great actress. I think she's a lovely actress. The guy that plays Saru, I feel
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, thank you. He is an actor that I feel most sorry for in life. I keep watching movies now, and I see him as like going years. He's like in the background or thing, and he's always been known as a bit of an actor's actor. That he's well and very popular, but most things he's in very heavy prosthetics, and then he's in. I was watching What We Do in the Shadows, and I was like, "It's Doug."
Yeah. It's so funny too, because I'm with you on the Klingons. I think the Klingons, that was like, and the other thing that breaks my heart is that they were like so serious about making the Klingon language accurate, like that they got the Klingon right. But those outfits they had him in, as I wrote in the book, kind of sounds like actors are in heavy prosthetic makeup with big fake teeth trying to speak this pretend language. Like, it didn't serve them. And if you listen to Mary Chieffo, who played L'Rell, talk about that experience, those suits were miserable. Like, they couldn't even sit down. They had to be like propped up on boards
they look
in between takes. And like,
heavy.
And if people loved it, maybe it'd be worth it. I don't know, but people hated it. And I feel so bad for them. And then you look at the Klingons in Strange New Worlds and you're like, there you go. Like, the Klingon redesign happened. I don't remember what the reaction was to the redesign in the motion picture and then later in Search for Spock. I was too young to know about that. But I have to imagine that, eventually people just accepted it. And again, I think that's what they were trying to do. Like, they, Roddenberry and them had more money, better prosthetics. And I think that's what the goal was here. But they just, it just went too far. But then you look at Saru, I swear to God, the close-ups of that prosthetic mask, that's a real guy. Like, that's not Doug Jones. That's a real alien.
Yeah. No, I do. That's the only character in there that I really liked.
But I do think the Strange New Worlds cast too, just to build on your point, that this was sort of where I was headed with that. Sorry, is that I feel like Discovery was never more Star Trek in like how it felt, than season 2. Like, because something about season 2 felt like the perfect blend of what Discovery was trying to be and what Star Trek was, and I think it's largely because Anson Mount, pitch perfect Captain Pike, Ethan Peck nailed Spock. And Rebecca Romaine is an excellent number 1. I mean, I was completely on board with all of it.
They could have made a woman to be number 1, and it would be perfect. I mean, they cast that brilliantly. I think the thing is that with me is just that they cast Strange New Worlds beautifully. And season 2 was, I agree with you, that's the one series I watched. So I watched all the first season, I watched all the second season. They lost me halfway through the third season. And then when they obviously shot into the future, I came back and I had to watch. I did actually think I did watch the second half of the third season just to understand what was going on. And I like bits of that. I like the Borg type thing, which I forgot the name of now. I thought that was going to lead into the Borg, and it just didn't. But then into the future, and they did the burn, and I checked out again. I was just like, oh, God's sake. I was looking forward to seeing new ships and new things. And then, so obviously we went into like the 4th season. Is that right? 4th or 5th season?
Yeah. 4th
when
season.
When did they reach Starfleet Academy sort of thing? Sorry.
Well, they got to Starfleet in the middle of season 3.
Well, so that's why I sort of went back into it again.
Yeah. And then I will say, look, in the book, you'll see that like I quite love season 3 because I felt that season 3 was 100% them saying, okay, you think we're not about Starfleet Federation values? The Discovery is going to be the lone example of the true believers of Starfleet. And like that bit with the guy in the season 3 premiere, like he's alone on this station and every day he puts up like Federation flag. Oh, right in the heart is where it got me. And then when he meets Michael Burnham, like, I love it.
Yeah. And he has a massive.
Then we get to the end, and there's a sad Kelpian on a planet made of dilithium, and I was like, oh, guys. I mean, now again, for me, I am fine with a Star Trek that has a dopey, especially a dopey technobabble kind of problem and solution. That is that
my
also
other
is
channel. Yeah, my other channel
very
is called
Star Trek.
Tachyon Pulse Podcast for a reason.
Yes, our Tachyon Pulses failed to penetrate. But yeah, so like again, did I love it? No. Was it a good ending? You know, was it? I think they could have gotten there better, but I loved the spirit of that season, the idea that it was about bringing the Federation back together. Season 4, I do think the dark matter anomaly was a little much when you're destroying whole planets in Star Trek. That
I tell you what, I didn't watch all of season 4.
Yeah,
I didn't watch.
Yeah, that's lost me. Like when books I mean, I'll be honest. I even watching it on the rewatch, seeing Quajon get destroyed, I was like, oh, that was a bad choice. Like, I mean, it should I think it should have been like tertiary, like where the planet was in trouble. Like we didn't need a full Death Star moment. And I get rising stakes, all that. But I loved that one. Didn't like the beginning. Loved the ending, because what a Star Trek ending. They didn't attack, like they went and were like, we are going to do first contact, be diplomacy. Like that is a Star Trek ending, you know.
Yeah.
They destroyed a whole planet.
I did watch it. I'm sure when I started watching the 5th season, I must have watched it, but I can't actually remember. But I've famously said over and over again, I really like the 5th season. Other than the end.
What a romp.
Awful. But the last
episode, what was awful? What was awful?
I didn't like the end. I thought it went off the cliff like a lemon at the end.
Wait, do you mean the thing with the progenitors thing, or do you mean the like?
No, just the final episode, the way we saw it old, and then it linked into the short.
Yeah, I mean,
and stuff. I just thought it was bad.
That was the weakest part of the finale for me. I would have preferred them to just leave it more second star to the right, straight on till morning. That's a way you end a Star Trek, because then you can always come back.
Yeah, but I actually thought the 5th season was interesting. I thought it was well done, but I mean, you cannot argue that Discovery was badly made, because it wasn't, and it was well written and everything. It was just I didn't care about the characters except for Empress Georgia, who I adored, and every episode she was in, I adored. The bit where she's doing the blinking to confuse the AI, I just freaking love that.
Well, can we talk about how in that episode I'm like, is that David Cronenberg in Star Trek? Is he just David Cronenberg shows up in Star Trek, just doesn't leave? I love that. Like, where else do you get that? Cronenberg.
But that takes me into section 31 a little bit.
Section 31. I have.
Well,
boy, am I in the minority on that one, because
I did not like section 31.
I am one of 4 positive reviews. Now, I will say this.
Dear Lord, I'm disrespect. You look, I haven't got control of kicking you off this.
I understand. Well, let me tell my story here.
Go on.
Doing what I do, I've long followed the development, because I also love Michelle Yeoh, and Empress Georgia I thought was a great character. And so any bits of news I could get, anybody I could talk to, like, hey, what's going on with section 31? It was something they did not want. Paramount wanted nothing to do with it. Michelle Yeoh pitched it, and I think it was more of like, I
forget how many times they offered to get her out the contract. It was 2 or 3 times they offered to let her out, and she kept refusing.
Yeah, and then she wins an Oscar, and they're like, oh shit. All right, we need to make this happen. And I know that they had, again, it was originally a pilot episode for a TV show. And when they greenlit the movie, I don't know if they allowed for barely any rewrites. I think they maybe reworked the little bit of the last act. I don't know if San died in the original draft. But they also couldn't go a second over 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that what section 31 is supposed to be, and again, I heard this and kind of gleaned this, is that they were trying to make a Star Trek that wasn't what people who don't like Star Trek think Star Trek is.
Yeah.
You know how, like, it's like Solo for Star Wars. Star Wars is like, oh, Star Wars is the Jedi and the Force and this family and blah, blah, blah. And like Solo's just a guy and his dog zipping around in starships having adventures. You know what I mean? And I think that is what Star Section 31 was supposed to be. It was supposed to be this thing so that people, when they're done with Tulsa King or what other Taylor Sheridan stuff, would be like, oh, what's this with an Oscar winner? And then you get, you know, the Dirty Dozen / Guardians of the Galaxy Star Trek version. Yeah. And knowing all that and watching it pre-screening, I evaluated it for what it was, not for what it wasn't. I didn't write that this isn't the Section 31 that, you know, Sloan promised us in DS9 or whatever. I was like, this is supposed to be a fun little space romp, and it is, you know. And but I mean, you look at all the negative, look at all the bad reviews. They're reviewing what the movie isn't, and I don't think that's a fair thing to do. If you cannot like it for that. You can like whatever, not like whatever you want. But if you're going to do criticism, you have to evaluate a work.
I'll tell you why I critiqued it. It's badly made. It's very jerky, and you can see where I know the point where they went from series, and then they thought Michelle Yeoh was getting a bit more popular even before the Oscar, and they went, okay, maybe we could do a mini series. And then I think Paramount tried to get out of it, and then Michelle Yeoh won the Oscar, and they went, okay, we'll make a movie. Michelle Yeoh basically said, I'm available for this time, and that's it. And they've tried to basically do it as a double episode because of the time restraints on, like, at the studio level sort of thing. So they got this script that was then supposed to be a mini series, and they just went with like this bit, and this bit, and they just sort of redid it and stuff together. But you can see when you're watching it. I don't think the characters develop at all because they were supposed to develop over 10 episodes at least, sort of thing, and they just didn't.
You know what people don't get? Alok Sahar, the actor's name, Omari Hardwick, his character. He's the only Section 31 person in the entire group. Everyone else is like subcontractors, people that he brought in, with the exception, of course, of Rachel Garrett, who is actually Starfleet. But
which also makes no sense. Rachel Garrett should not have been there. The whole that they did that. And this is going to say, I know you've got a point about how that they're not really fans of Star Trek, and that you think they are because they. So we'll talk about that. Rachel Garrett in that whole movie makes no sense. The whole point of Section 31 and the whole point of the story was that Section 31 do the things the Federation can't do. So what did the Federation do? Send a captain to overview it. That's not logical.
She was, I think, a lieutenant at the time. She was not a captain.
Yeah, a lieutenant, but still a Federation officer to go and sort of oversee it. It doesn't make any sense.
You're fair enough. The logic does not quite work there. That like the reason the Federation can't operate there, so they send a Starfleet person. I mean, and there is of course Starfleet intelligence, which is different than Section 31. Yeah. And again, like I said, I think that is a fair critique, and I think you're 100% right in that this is a cobbled together story that is not.
I felt they rushed it, to be honest. I felt they went, Michelle Yeoh's won an Oscar. We can do a movie. We've got this much time to do it. Let's just do it.
It took 5 years, and you're right. They rushed it. Like they rushed they did not, instead of saying, okay, let's make this a proper movie. Let's do something with this character. Yeah. They took what they had, and again, we're trying to make this thing to appeal to new fans, but you put it on Paramount Plus. The only people who are going to watch are the Star Trek people who know what Section 31 is and come in expecting a very different kind of story. They're not looking for Guardians of the Galaxy. And the other thing that I loved about this and what Lower Decks did in the final season is that Alok Sahar and William Boimler are the only two like good Section 31 people like we've ever, like they gave us actual Section 31 people who aren't jagoffs. And I think that was the thing that they were trying to sort of like diversify that organization, make it like, and again, I think you could say, what's his name? Was his name Harris in Enterprise?
Yeah.
Like he was a bit of a jerk, but he wasn't Sloan. Sloan was the worst, I understand why people didn't mess with it, but I also like for what that film is trying to be, I think it is a fun little space romp. And I mean, I think like you said, it's not well made. I don't know if I fully agree with that. Cause again, the visuals, it looks nice. It looks nice. Olatunde Osunsami did some really interesting things with direction that he hadn't done in other stuff.
Yeah.
Which again, I think trying to be new, trying to justify its existence, and then, but it has this tonal departure from what we expect from Discovery.
Yeah.
And the like phase fight thing, I thought that was clever. I thought that was kind of fun.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, you didn't like that?
How does the phase technology know where the floor is?
This I don't know.
Just did my head in. How come the phase technology knows where the floor is? It just wound me up. But
I mean, I get it.
Maybe overthinking it, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, my kid does a bit every time because you know the theory that when you go through the transporter, you actually die and are just recreated.
I did a video on that not long ago. It destroys you and copies
you. Yeah. So every time we're watching Star Trek, my kid does a bit where it'll be like, "Oh, R.I.P. Captain Kirk. Happy birthday, Captain Kirk." And again, I feel like Star Wars, Star Trek, you lose me when you're like, that's not how magic works.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's fair to not buy it because you're right. I never thought about that. How does because it's like in the ghosts thing, that ghost show, they're like, they can't go through the floor, but they can go through walls. Yeah. It is the same problem.
Yeah, exactly. And well, you get it with lots of things like that. With the transporter is really good at knowing exactly where the floor is because nobody ever goes, it's fused my feet.
Especially like, remember when Jillian jumps on Kirk? Like, they should have got back like a Jillian Kirk pudding. What we got back didn't live long, thankfully.
Yeah, exactly. But no, there's loads of things about Section 31 I didn't like, but also because Giorgio's just a different character. All of the team that they put together seemed to be morons. It just irritated me. But to go from Giorgio in Discovery that I adored, I thought she was the best thing about it, to that movie, I just wound me up. But the worst I think thing is, if you mute that show, you would not know it was Star Trek. If you just listen to it and you don't watch the opening credits or anything. But the annoying thing is, they had opportunities to put Starfleet vessels in that show and just didn't. That we see Mirror Universe ships. They should look like Federation ships, but they just didn't. And the whole garbage truck thing was just stupid. But the opening sequence I adored. I thought the opening sequence was amazing. But then they have the Emperor's ship, and I'm like, it doesn't look anything like a Federation vessel, but it should. So I'm just like, that's a missed opportunity. You could have injected some Star Trek into it without really trying. And there's things like,
honestly, I'd have taken a movie of just young Giorgio, and how you get in that contest to be like, give me that movie, guys. I'll watch that. Yeah,
I would have looked. That should have been after. That film on its own would have been amazing. I'd much rather watch that. I think that would have been cool. Except Emperor George wouldn't have been in it. Maybe that's what they should have done. Michelle Yeoh is too busy, but she'll come in for a few bits. So we'll have a few and then we'll do it like a flashback. That would have been awesome.
I mean, Paramount, call us, for God's sakes. We're trying to help you here.
Yeah, exactly. And one last point, and then we'll move on from it. But
sure.
The whole thing about Emperor Giorgio even being in that movie isn't logical. They go and get her to help, but they have no idea at that point that actually the problem is the God Killer, was that called? I forget. Is that's her device sort of thing, and that it's anything to do with the Mirror Universe. They don't know at that point. So why on earth did they go and get Giorgio?
Well, I mean, look, like I said, evaluating the movie on its own merits for what it was. I think it is a fun little space romp. Now, if we're going to get into the Star Trek of it all, why is she in that period? Why the Guardian of Forever was going to send her back to a time before the Mirror Universe and the Prime Universe diverged, which if the opening of Enterprise is canon, is pre-First Contact.
Yeah.
So I thought Section 31 was going to be like, I wrote an article about how like we're going to get the history of the Mirror Universe. We're going to find out, how they took over the I can't remember the name of the Vulcan ship. I used to know it just like that.
We're getting old. Our memories used to be so.
There's a lot more Star Trek stuff to remember. I filled it up with things like, with lower decks facts like Shax and Dr. Ta'ana. But that like, I thought that was what we were going to get her like in First Contact times. which, you know, and that I think is sort of part of the problem with us as Star Trek fans, especially with there being so much of it now. Like when you go into something new, we've written at least 3 different versions of whatever show or movie in our head already. You know what I mean? And the same thing happens with Star Wars, where you go and you see this thing and it does not match your expectations. And some people, and some people, like, you know, for me, every time I see a Star Wars movie, or even when I saw those Star Trek movies, the JJ ones, my first thought was, I need to see that again. Like I feel things, but I don't quite know what they are, so I think I need to see that again. And, you know,
I have a weird feeling in my stomach, but
yeah, is it good? Is it bad? Am I hungry? But I also think that, like, again, I do think that with time, and as our expectation fades and we come to acceptance, go through the stages of grief, almost in a way, we get to acceptance that Discovery is what it is, that Section 31 is what it is, Picard season 1 and 2 is what it is. You go back and you watch them and you can see, you know, the gems stick out, the good things stick out more than the bad things. Like, you know, I remember thinking, I don't know, you've read it more recently than I have, but I feel like my review for Picard season 1 was maybe my harshest of the new Trek shows.
Well, look, because
I think I remember calling it like a beautiful mess or something.
Yeah, it is a mess.
And I went back and watched it ahead of season 3, and I was like, oh, this isn't quite it's not as bad as I remember. Like the sheer effing hubris lady, not for nothing, she had a point. Jean-Luc kind of came in there, you know, and the whole, like, again, accepting this sort of what this was. And what's funny is you talk about knowing whether or not people are like real fans. First of all, I feel like if you like one Star Trek thing, you are a real fan in my book. You know, you don't have to like everything. But the showrunner for that first season, look, I'm saying series because I'm talking to a
British person. Yeah, I get that on bloody comments all the time.
I actually like series better than season. It feels more correct because it's a series of episodes.
A series is a boom, 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 boom. That's a series. Calm down. But people yell at me. I've had to try to learn to say season and series.
But Michael Chabon is an alumni of the University of Pittsburgh. There's a movie called Wonder Boys about a professor. You've seen Wonder Boys? When I was at Pitt, I got invited to a Wonder Boys party at the English department. I was like, oh yeah. I had a pocket full of stuff, like, you know, I had some booze. I was like, we're gonna party. And I came into a lovely dinner party I'm like, oh, of course, they're 20 years older now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Michael Chabon was there, and I am a nut for Wonder Boys, nut for Mystery of Pittsburgh, and I was just like, wanted to say hello, trying to play it cool. And I don't remember how it happened, but the exchange we had was about Star Trek. I mean, my man, like, I think I made a Star Trek reference, and he jumped on. He was like, Star Trek. And then what did we talk about? We talked about, I think we talked about something with TNG. It's hazy because there was lots of wine that was had. But I mean, again, the guy he put the Captain Picard Day banner in the first episode. You know what I mean? Like, the fandom, it expresses itself in a very different way. So if I did say that I thought that maybe the people making it weren't real fans, or, you know, with the exception of JJ Abrams, who I think admittedly said that he likes Star Wars more than Star Trek, which, you know, you have that because Star Wars is, every institution is going to fail you, but people will make the right choice given the chance. Whereas Star Trek is, people will let you down, but if you build the perfect institution with the right value system, those that follow it will catch and correct those people.
Yeah.
It is the two opposite approaches to the same thing. People making good choices to help each other. And, you know, that's
the best we can be. Star Trek's the best of us.
Yeah. And I think that's why Strange New Worlds, to maybe shift into that now, I think that's why that has hit so well with people, because where Picard was trying to challenge what we knew about Picard, it didn't want to be TNG season 8. Discovery was trying to expand what Star Trek is going to be. Strange New Worlds was Paramount feeling like, okay, we can give them a classic show, and they're not going to hit us with what they said with Enterprise, with it's just the same old ship show BS.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, Strange New Worlds is not afraid to be the more hopeful side of Star Trek that I think people might have worried when it came back was corny or antiquated in a way. I think you look at the Superman movies around the same time. Superman is a paragon of virtue and morality, and they darkened him up in those 2010s movies.
Yeah, no, it's a different era politically. Yeah, you look at Man of Steel, it's definitely. So I just got Picard season 1. I actually don't like Picard season 1. I liked it. Picard season 2 annoyed me because I thought it started brilliantly and then just went off the cliff. And the whole thing with the Borg, this is what I argued Terry Matalas about, because obviously he wrote that, so he got quite. But I just went, if Jurati had just gone, it's me, don't fire. That's one episode. But I didn't.
But it's a time loop. You have to do it that way so that
I know
they can go back. And
not
look,
depending on the way, depending on which way you go with time. Either one way you have to do this time loop, and the other way you don't.
Well, if she comes in as like, "Hey, it's me, Jurati," then they have no reason to. But then again, you got Q involved too. I will say this though, I did.
When Q was involved, made no sense.
I love the fact that they made a Borg that, like, the Borg was created to be the villain. That Mitch Hurley created the Borg. I think is that Maurice Hurley. I'm sorry. He created the Borg because he wanted to give them a villain that they could not Star Trek their way out of. He wanted a villain that they could just fight and that was tough and was scary. And here we are, Picard season 2. There's a version of the Borg that's like, hey, we want provisional Federation membership, and they got it. And again, that is Star Trek. Like, how they get there, does it make sense? Doesn't matter. The fact that you take this enemy who you think you can't ever see eye to eye with and find common ground, doesn't get more Star Trek than that to me.
My issue was Jurati was a Borg queen, and she said, "Well, I'm good now, and I want to help people." And I was like, "Didn't you assimilate 10,000 people to build your spaceship?"
Well, I remember, but they all agreed to it, which. Yeah. I would love to hear that pitch, though. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah. Like, how much do they know what they're getting into?
I want to see whatever they signed before they went.
Do you want friends all the time? Sure, that sounds nice. Wait, what are you doing?
I'm just like, I'm still thinking she assimilated 10,000 people, but anyway. To go, my point there is Easter eggs. Picard season 3. There's loads of Easter eggs in that. I mean, it's written by Terry Matalas, who is clearly in love with Star Trek, and he worked on Star Trek previous. He worked on he did even work on TNG.
I know he
TNG was towards the end.
I know that if I remember the story that I heard, he was like running tapes back and forth from Video Village.
Yeah, he used to sneak into Paramount, didn't he, as well, to like leave scripts.
Yeah, I know it was definitely DS9, early DS9 times. But I know he was around, and like he eventually got linked up with Brandon Braga, probably before the end of TNG. And I know Voyager and Enterprise was like that was his first story credit was the Zombie Vulcans.
Yeah, I mean, so I watched Picard season 3, and I actually watched it. I've watched that season 3 times, and actually I can critique it a little bit more as we watched it. But the first time round, I was just like, the nostalgia overswept me, and I knew it was the Enterprise D, and I still went, yay, sort of thing. There are problems with that episode, that series, but not enough that I even on there going, that I'm really nitpicking now. I need to calm down. The whole thing with the changelings, I didn't adore, but anyway, it was fine. And the young Guinan, I wasn't a big fan of. But anyway, in that, they felt like they were putting Easter eggs in, and he was doing it on purpose because it was a goodbye to the TNG. And in Lower Decks, I think they do it because I think Mike McMahon did a beautiful job. And I always say Lower Decks is like a love letter to TNG. They're just somebody who enjoys it. I don't feel like all the time when they put Easter eggs and things, because sometimes I think they do it wrong. They put something in and go, Fans will love this. And I'll go back to Rachel Garrett in Section 31. I think they did that as a bit of fan, thing to get us excited. But
Sam Richardson's character being a changeling from undiscovered country. That was for us. Yeah. No one cares about that but us.
No, but I feel it's cynical. I feel they do it because there is division within our fan base at the moment. That people either they love Kurtzman or they hate and want him fired and probably burned at the stake. It's probably that would be the best thing for him. I'm in between. I love bits. I think they've improved Star Trek over time really well.
And Jay, how is that different from your TNG experience? You love bits, you hate bits. Like, I mean, that's being a Star Trek fan.
The first 2 seasons of TNG were awful.
I mean, I think I saw a video of yours. I didn't click on it unfortunately yet, but where you talk about hate click media and like negative engagement, and I think that's sort of why we're so divided right now, is because there are people who have a because I noticed that if I frame a headline in a way that seems negative or seems to take like a more critical to not critical like analysis, but critical like criticizing slant, it does better than me saying this is brilliant.
I'm the same in my videos. Sometimes you think it's not worth doing that positive video because nobody will watch it. Yeah. I really love this. There's no point doing a video. I really love Murderbot at the moment. There's no point doing a video on it.
I thought that being one of like 4 people to positively review Section 31,
one of 4 people, that's insane.
That would have gotten at least curiosity clicks. Like, let's see what this like. Is he just is it just letters? Is it even words?
Was he paid for this? What's wrong with it?
But one of the reviews that I've done that went the farthest was that I did a tepid review of the Never-Ending Story, because a retrospective review where I was like, I loved this as a kid, but then I read the book and I was like, oh, as an adaptation of the book, it's not as good as you remember. And again, am I criticizing the movie like this movie's bad? No. Do the comments think I'm saying that? Oh yes. There's just something about negativity that keeps it going.
No,
and
that's just to my video, unfortunately, that it just I use the example of Superman and Fantastic Four at the moment. And I know people that work in PR that have seen it. They've seen both. Yeah. And they were saying that the expectation is that they're both going to bomb. And I'm just like, but both of the people said that, but we've seen them. They're good films. They're really good. I feel looks like Superman might do okay, but Fantastic Four is looking like it's going to do really badly. And both of them look at going, these are good films. They don't deserve. Pre-COVID, these are $1 billion movies. Now, they don't know what's going on with. They never know.
Well,
good
we chatted a bit about that. Like, I really think that the PR folks are kind of at a loss right now with how I don't think people know. I don't think studios. I don't think PR folks. I don't think people know quite what puts butts in seats. I mean, if you look at post-COVID, I think our only $1 billion superhero. First of all, I think there's been like 65, 68, less than $70 billion movies in history. So like the idea that it was just because they all came in a 10-year period, it doesn't mean that that's should be like the normal expectation. So I think that is a huge problem, that studios are spending like $500 million on a movie thinking they're going to make $1 billion.
Yeah.
If you can't make a good superhero movie for $180 million, I would say just do a little, limitations provide creative opportunities. And I think that the $2 billion superhero movies we've had are the ones with all the Spider-Men, and the one that brought back all the like Logan and Deadpool, the Deadpool and Wolverine.
A couple of Marvel ones, Endgame or whatever they made.
Well, no, that's post-COVID. I'm saying post-COVID.
Oh, post-COVID, no, 100%.
It's just those two, and so
full of Barbie.
I meant superhero things, but Barbie, Oppenheimer,
a handful of $1 billion movies at all. Oppenheimer,
Mario Brothers, I think got there.
Mario Brothers did. Nobody expected that to do well. Everyone thought that was going to get panned.
Video game movies are successful now. Remember when video game movies
kids films do well? Yeah, kids films do well. If you're going to take a kid, I think I made the point. If you're going to take a kid to a film, they'll go to the cinema. If you're not taking your kid, people say, "Oh, I'll watch it on streaming in a couple of months."
That's another thing too. Why are you releasing stuff on streaming in 45 days or 30 days? Like, I used to take a year.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go see Sinners in the movie theater again right now. You know, I would go see. Sinners was good. I would probably go see Thunderbolts again. You know, it came out at a time when there was a lot of new releases. You know, but you know, with the I probably would have checked out Thunderbolts again, but I'm pretty sure I can get it on digital now. You know,
if it's not on digital now, it is soon. I think it might be on a paywall at the moment on Disney Plus.
Yeah,
I've seen it advertised though, and I was like, "Really already?" And what's the other one?
So
Captain America 3. I couldn't believe when that ended up on Disney Plus when it did. I was like, "Oh come!" I actually paid to watch it through a paywall.
Yeah,
about 2 weeks before, and I even remember saying to my wife at the time, "I really want to watch it. I missed it at the cinema for whatever reason. I'm going to pay to watch it." And I even said to her, time, "It'll be on Disney Plus in a couple of weeks, but sorry, I'll take the risk." And then it was, and I was like, "Oh, for God's sake!"
And you know, again, Captain America. There's another thing too with like to get on the Marvel thing, which, by the way, Marvel is completely inspired by Star Trek. Like Kevin Feige has said that he looked at the Star Trek movies as part of an inspiration for, like, he's a big Star Trek nut. That's why he pulled Metalis in for Vision Quest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like not every movie is going to be Endgame or this big massive thing. Like Captain America 4, you get Captain America versus a Hulk. If you can't have a little fun with that, I don't think that's the movie's problem. Like, is it the greatest movie of all time? You tell me. But you know,
I like to play a game with that because how many times should Hawk get have all of his bones broken? And it's a drinking game, and every time he's like, "Yeah, he definitely got all his bones broken." Then take a shot. You're pissed.
Well, that's the thing about the vibranium magic. Like I don't think any of the force gets through the suit. That's the only way that works. Because even the shield, because I'm like, you hit the shield, shouldn't Steve Rogers now be a puddle of goo? Behind the
at least
shield?
Steve Rogers had the strength.
He did have the steer. Yeah, that's true. That's true. A little extra magic to bolster the disbelief.
Yeah. Let's go back to Star Trek then.
Please. I'm sorry.
I was just like, so I think we both agree Lower Decks is excellent. I actually love Prodigy. I'm gutted. It looks like Netflix aren't going to do the third season, which I was disappointed.
Do you think that's a merger thing? Do you think that like it's a non-starter because everything's in flux there? I don't think it got
the hours on Netflix. For what I'm told, it just didn't get the hours on Netflix. So that, you know what Netflix are like. If it doesn't do this much, they're like cancel.
Yeah. And of course it's all streaming. It's all minutes watched, and those are 22-minute episodes. You know, like
which doesn't help.
Yeah.
But apparently, what I was told anyway, the plan was when Netflix took it on, they were like, if this does well, we'll definitely pay for third season, and then it just didn't. So which is a shame. But I actually thought, particularly the last couple of episodes of series 1 of Prodigy, particularly were the most Star Trek thing I've seen in years. I thought it was great. It went on a bit, and it was very much a kid show, and it was quite hard to watch at times.
The first couple episodes are very, very kid focused. Like it's the Clone Wars thing too. Like it starts out very kiddie, and then but then they start working in enough bits that that you're like, you don't even notice you're like, oh, that Jankum Pog, he's incorrigible.
But I think they messed up massively with Prodigy in that they did a series for kids, but then they focused a lot of the storyline on Voyager episodes. And the problem is, I can imagine there with my kid going, watch this cartoon. And they go, no, I don't want to. I go, watch this cartoon. And then here's your homework. You've got to go and watch this many episodes of Voyager to understand why she gives a crap about Chakotay. It's just like, so I think they made a horrible error there. They made a kid's show that only the dads would understand what the hell was going on. And the moms, obviously. Moms. But so I do think they made but I feel that Kurtzman, I don't feel that Kurtzman is a fan of Star Trek. And I think he's a fan of what he did in JJ Abrams' Star Trek. He wrote it, and he keeps trying to drag it into New Trek, like he did with Picard season 1, with the whole Romulan Empire and the Romulan destruction from a supernova that makes no sense. But I think he drags it in. But then you watch the best stuff of Star Trek is the stuff that Kurtzman's had nothing to do with for me.
See, now that gets to the Kathleen Kennedy argument in Lucasfilm, where all of a sudden Kathleen Kennedy is responsible for everything that, and again, Kathleen Kennedy, if you're under the age of 25, name your top 5 favorite movies. I guurantee you
she had
with
she
3
had
of them.
something
You know
to do
what I
with
mean?
all of them. Well, she was Spielberg's number 2, wasn't she, for years?
Yeah. And, so like the idea is that like, everything that sucks is the main name's fault. Kennedy, Kurtzman, these K-name people are just having a rough decade in these Star franchises. And then the things that aren't the things that they like, that's Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and Mike McMahon and Akiva Goldsman. Like it's these other people. And I say, I mean, at least again, insofar as I understand how being an executive producer works, Kurtzman has as much to do with Lower Decks as he does with Strange New World season 2, or whatever show he isn't show. Like if he's not show running it, he has as much to do with that as he does.
I think producers would have more impact on an actual what a TV looks like than an executive.
Well, because he show ran Discovery. 2
or 3 seasons of Discovery. Yeah, he didn't show run the last couple of seasons, did he? I don't think.
No, Michelle Paradis took over.
Yeah, when it got better.
Yeah. I mean, you know what?
Yeah.
It definitely shifted. It definitely shifted in tone. I don't know about Picard's season. I know he was there. Yeah, I remember the video commentary.
He was quite heavily involved in the first season, not so much the second, and virtually nothing.
I mean, now I know they say like Michael Chabon was the showrunner, but he's a novelist, so maybe Kurtzman was like doing the logistics, producing side of that. I don't really know. But my point is I feel that like, insofar as he may have notes on things, like Mike McMahon didn't sneak Lower Decks past Kurtzman.
Oh God,
no, I mean? Yeah, like so I think I do think that he what was the Section 30? Rob Kaczynski, I think was his name.
Yeah, Rob Kaczynski
was the one that
the whole thing with Kurtzman told him that everyone's Trek fans are dying.
No. He said that Star Trek is dying because it's not generating new fans. It's not generating.
He'd actually say that Trekkies are all we're dying. He literally said that we're dying out. That's
not the quote that I remember. It was the Star Trek is dying.
It's not generating new fans, and old fans are old, basically.
Well, I mean, but that's the truth of it. I mean, like that's how it worked at TNG. TNG fans were not like TNG fans may have found TOS, but not all of the TNG fans started as like came from TOS to TNG. Star Trek needs to build its own fan base. Like, I think that again, maybe I'm wrong, but if they threw Discovery and Picard on Netflix and Amazon Prime and left them there for 2 years, would they do super numbers? I don't know, but I know the fans of those shows would find them. And then they would be curious about Star Trek, and they would come in and they'd look at Voyager and they'd look at these things. And that is how it has worked in both waves. Well, with the animated series, and then because the animated series got kids into the syndicated regular episodes, and Star Trek was TOS was the highest rated syndicated show for I think 25 years or something. And then until TNG came out as the first hour-long drama, first run syndication show.
And then Stargate, it's asked just for the Stargate people in the audience.
And Stargate, that's the one that I was like dipping in and out of. I'd never I'm not as like into it as I am with Star Trek. I am much more sort of not as critical perhaps, but more like you with New Trek with Stargate, where I'm dipping in and out, where I'm like, I don't know my SGU or my SGA as well as maybe I should.
Yeah. And that's fine. You're forgiven because you like Section 31, so I'm not trusting anything you say anyway.
If I like Stargate, I'd bring down the whole ship.
Oh my God, no. But let's see. My issue with Kurtzman is I think a lot of the things I really dislike about like Discovery season 1 is stuff that I feel he dragged from the movies that he created, he wrote. Picard season 1. There's elements of that were dragged in from the movies, from the JJ Abrams movies, and that's what frustrates me. But also, it's things like his business decisions. And one of the main ones is, we're going about the Section 31, that it was not Star Trek to try and draw people in. I thought that was a stupid idea.
But I don't think that's him. I think that's the studio telling him what they need.
it seemed to be coming from Kurtzman. Well, Secret Hideout and the deal that they've got, Paramount doesn't have a great deal of influence on what the actual creative side. Kurtzman it does make most of those decisions.
Sure, but
from what I understand as the contract.
Sure, and that's almost the same deal that Berman had back in the day.
Yeah.
But they still had like, this is what we want this to do. For Section 31 to have been a hit with the studio so that more like one-off movies could have been made, it would have had to garner like high viewership from people who don't normally watch other Star Trek. It would have had to have been a gateway on-ramp into the Star Trek stuff on Paramount Plus. I think if it had done that, we'd be getting either, Section 31 Part 2 or, something else.
I understand that the plan was to do a Picard movie, but there were always slight questions about how would that work with Patrick Stewart. I actually thought we were going to get a TNG movie, but I've never heard any rumblings about it, to be honest. But I would have thought that's just logical. Just Jonathan Frakes could do a TNG movie. This makes total sense. But it's also things like is again the business model that he pitched to Paramount was basically that we will do 5 seasons that are very different, and we will mess with genre. And if you don't like one Star Trek series, you'll watch another Star Trek series.
Absolutely.
I think that is idiotic. So TNG came in and it made a whole new generation of Star Trek fans because it was good Star Trek. It was good sci-fi. And that's the way to... I would argue Star Trek is quite a specific thing. And you can do genre-twisting episodes. We'll talk about Strange New Worlds in a minute and my frustration with Strange New Worlds. You can twist with the genre stuff, but it's still got to be Star Trek. And New Trek for me wanders away from that way too much.
And that's exactly what was said about DS9. Because first of all, you said TNG was good Star Trek, good sci-fi. First 2 seasons, really? Is that what people were saying? That's not. Was that what the streets were saying, Jay?
No. As soon as LaForge suddenly got an engineering degree from somewhere, and they realised that Klingon's probably good for security. And it went stratospheric.
Well, what happened is Michael Piller came in. Michael Piller came in, and he was able to run that. I mean, I love the behind the scenes stuff as much as the on the scenes, like on the screen stuff. And the Chaos on the Bridge is an incredible documentary because Shatner was able to get these producers and some of the actors to open up, I think, in a way that no one else would have, because they knew that their Star Trek wasn't nearly as contentious as his.
There were riots.
Yeah.
When he kissed Uhura, they were actually like violence on the streets. It's ridiculous.
That's actually, according to what Nichelle Nichols said, they got like one letter where some guy saying he's like, I ain't fond of them, but I'd kiss her too, or something. Like it was like the biggest problem was the network suits were nervous about it. And in fact, there's a really good article on CBR.com written by a very handsome man who may or may not have liked Section 31, about how William Shatner saved that scene. It's based on a Nichelle Nichols story. The video's in the article. Check it out.
Yeah, I think I remember saying that the studio forced Roddenberry to change the storyline for that Kirk was sort of like forced to kiss her rather than wanted to, because they said maybe that wouldn't be quite so contentious because it's not his fault he had to do it. And if true, that is but it shows the time. It shows that the fact that they're allowed a Russian on the bridge still amazes me.
Yeah.
What is it? Can you tell me the directions of the nuclear vessels?
Nuclear vessels.
Just perfect.
I think they're in Alameda. I love that there's a lady in there. The one lady who's like, I think they're in Alameda, was apparently not. She was just like not an extra and just. I don't know if that's true. But I would love it to. I'd love it to be that she was just.
I think that's happened a lot of low budget movies though, that they used to do that. Then they used to be like, okay, we need to film. We'll just do it. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, we're just gonna do it. No permits.
Yeah. Getting the permits and stuff is too expensive. We'll just go. Get out of it quick. So I think you should do a lot in LA. God knows how they filmed big chunks of that, to be honest, without with the permissions and stuff. But we could talk. Do you want to talk about the future of Star Trek for the last 20 minutes or so?
Sure.
Go in there.
Yeah, well, I will say that I do think we should touch on your frustration with Strange New Worlds, because it is a legitimate one. Yes, right. It is a legitimate one.
My main frustration with Strange New Worlds is then
Yeah.
that there is only 10 episodes a season.
Right.
Not 24, 25, 26 episodes per season. So I always call it prime Star Trek real estate. And it's science fiction. And one of the frustrations I have, it's science fiction, and far too often they go, no, don't worry about the science. For example, their reasoning behind the musical where everyone jumped into musical, and I'm like, and that's not even remotely, unless they all are suddenly psychic, this doesn't work. But anyway, for me, there are far too many quirky, silly episodes per season. We're getting at least 3 in the next season, I think, because I actually think the murder mystery one is very much a quirky, even though that does remind me of some of the Data episodes like Sherlock Holmes and stuff. The one where the bridge crew are all going to be Vulcans, and I suspect the Trelawney episode is going to be a comedy episode.
The Trelawney is the Harry Potter professor.
Yeah.
You're thinking of Trelane.
I knew I said it right. Trelane. Thank you very much. Well,
and again, we don't know he's Trelane. He's
fucking Trelane.
I mean, they put him in the coat. He does the snap.
He's Trelane. But we might get the answer of whether he's Q or not. So that'll be good. 3 episodes, and they did it in the last season. They had 3 quirky episodes. I haven't watched the first season for a while. I don't think they did particularly in the first season.
They did in the first season. I think there was the Spock hijinks where him and T'Pring switch bodies.
Yeah, that was.
And then there was, I think there was like one other one that was. It's kind of all blended together. I'm.
Yeah. Well, I have a love-hate relationship with them anyway. I actually loved it when they turned Ethan Peck's Vulcan as Spock. Who I can moan about Spock the way they've done that, to be honest, as well. I feel like they've just rushed what they did over the original series and all the movies with way Spock battle between his human and Vulcan side. They just sort of went, let's get on with it. And they just sort of squished it and condensed it.
Well, I think I feel like what they're doing here is they're like, oh, we have a chance because since he goes more Vulcan even by the time of the original series, they're like, now is where we can make him more human. And I think it's all based off the fact off the fact that, Leonard Nimoy smiled in the cage. Yeah. When they found the little singing flowers, and that's a nice way
of looking at it. I do like that. I loved the episode when he became human, particularly the bit when he goes to fight Kirk's younger brother. I thought that was brilliant. I'd launched a million memes. I adored the Lower Decks crossover. I thought it was one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek in years. I thought it was amazing. Truly
a masterpiece from beginning to end.
Yeah,
really.
The musical makes me want to hurt myself. I hated it, and I always said the musical, because it's such a silly, quirky episode, and so I felt like it was just done for the actors who went, I can sing, and they went, oh, okay then. It felt to me like it should have been released as like an 11th episode, or like almost like released at Christmas as a Christmas special.
If
then
only.
I'd have let it go.
Yeah.
But it was the penultimate episode of a season. That really should be, those 2 last episodes should be building up to the end of the season for me. And they had this stupid
musical. I mean, look, I didn't go for the musical one either. But the thing that made me happy about it is that I saw people talking about Star Trek in a positive way. And like I said, anything that gets that happening, anything that makes the club bigger, I look at it as a win. Because, whether you think that we got enough people in, again, we need bigger, Star Trek needs bigger numbers one way or the other, and the fan base does need to grow, and and that's why I think they do so many quirky episodes. And I think in a way it's because of how the negative engagement discourse, especially around politics and allegory, which by the way has been in Star Trek since its inception.
Star Trek's been woke since the beginning. So
it's, by the way, but it's, so I do too, because when I was a political reporter, the first time I saw woke, it was black activists using the term to like stay aware of this thing that police will try to do to jam you up. And I've never known, I've been told that people have described themselves this way. I've never known anyone to seriously describe their ideology that way, using that word. But I did write an article that says Star Trek was woke from the beginning, only because I was trying to own the top results of that Star Trek woke search thing. I wanted the first thing you see to be me
I know,
saying,
it's a word we're stuck with now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it's, again, the cynic in me is going, I think a bunch of right-wing idiots
100%.
went, well, black people can appropriate words, so we're going to appropriate one of theirs. And I
100%.
think it was done on
100%.
purpose, and that's why it makes a little bit of sick in my mouth, if I'm honest.
It's like SJW before that. Remember SJW?
Yeah.
And I think the problem with that was, like, the reason they went to SJW is because social justice warrior, that actually sounds kind of badass. Right? Call me a social justice warrior. I'm like, oh, thank you. I was non-combat in
liberal. We won't go into more politics because we'll get into trouble with the comments. But when did liberal become a bad word? I'm a liberal.
Whenever Roger Ailes started Fox News. Again, that is if you want to know that story, my book, What I Learned, Stories, Essays, and More, it features a breakdown where I did a breakdown of, like, ideological media, specifically conservative media, and how that has changed the way that, like, you can't even, like this, like, we can't even acknowledge that politics exists. Neither of us have said a political opinion. We have just acknowledged that there are politics, and I understand where you're like, let's not get into that, and I'm like, sure. But then again, it's Star Trek, like in the Star Trek Reddit, they have no politics, and I'm like, oh, do I have bad news for you guys?
No, Star Trek is just it's very much about politics, the social commentary, and 100%.
But I think that part of the reason so many quirky episodes are done that way is, again, to try to attract people who are like, oh, I don't want politics. That's too divisive. Like, they want fun space adventures. So I think that's why they think that, again, not understanding that people who will find Star Trek aren't going to sign up to Paramount Plus because they're like, oh, maybe I'll like Star Trek. Like, maybe if they sign up to Paramount Plus, that you might get people who discover it. But, I don't think, like, even the way this algorithmic stuff works, like, I'm sure if you watch a Taylor Sheridan show on your Paramount Plus, it's just going to recommend more of his stuff to you and stuff like that. Star Trek will be buried. Like, I think there's very few opportunities where, like, especially in the syndication days, where people would turn on a channel and be like, what's this? There'd be some crazy Star Trek thing happening, and people would.
That's how I found Firefly. I didn't watch it until it looked stupid. I happened to watch it one day, just thinking, oh, what's this? And then I immediately went out and bought the DVD box set and became a brown coat. But that's how we used to find things. Sometimes you just be watching flicking channels, and it doesn't happen anymore because with streaming, you've got to go looking for something. You don't really flick like.
And that's why I worry about the future of Star Trek. To segue into that last bit of our discussion, is that I feel like, there is talk, and people have said, because again, people have agendas. Every source that I ever had when I was doing reporting, they tell you the truth, or the truth is they know it, but they have a reason for telling you it the way it is.
I have to be really careful of that, particularly with Star Trek.
And think about, like, you've done some. You were the first. When I saw Billy Piper, I was like, holy shit, Jay nailed it. But the thing with Doctor Who saying that, like, oh, Disney doesn't like it because of the content. Well, Disney isn't making streaming shows for the stuff they own. Tony Gilroy for Andor did an interview where he said someone from Disney's like, oh, streaming's dead. So they're not gonna pay BBC to rent Doctor Who when they're not investing in, like, the Marvel and Star Wars stuff for their streaming service. I think it has everything to do with the business,
I actually think there's a problem with Doctor Who in that Disney have been sick of being told they're woke and are desperately trying to get away from that label that they create themselves. And Doctor Who is the most woke thing that we've had on TV in the last 2 years. And I still hate that frecking term. But it's got, Doctor Who has an agenda to it from Russell T Davies.
What story doesn't?
I like what he's trying to do, but it doesn't sit in America right now.
It's fair. We're going through it over here. But it's the same as putting a whore on a Russian on the bridge. It's just gay and trans folks now, and people aren't used to seeing that. People you know, talk about that being an agenda. It's like, no, they just exist and they're in stories now. You know, that's like, that was the thing with Discovery. Oh, Discovery, you know, Star Trek is political now. I swear to God, there's one of my, on the first on that review of Discovery season 1, there was a comment from a guy whose name is now, he's now a very big negative engagement YouTuber. Yeah. And I just remember the name because I actually was like, that name's a little clever. I won't say it because that's what they want us to do, is to say their names. But his comment was, I can't believe Star Trek is political now. And I just remember staring at it like, do people not know?
Yeah.
Do people not know? And
the original series, the black and white face episode.
Well, it wasn't subtle. It was not subtle. If you have any bigotry, leave it in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. And balance of terror.
Oh yeah, but it used to be subtle. No, it didn't.
Yeah.
The whole TNG transgender episode, that was not subtle.
Right. The Enterprise one with the where Archer's yelling at Trip because of the it was a very similar. It always mixes with the Progenitor episode of TNG for me, because it's very similar. But yeah, none of it was ever subtle. I mean, there were certain questions that were left open, but it's like the big questions that we don't know the answer to. Are these people allowed to be people? Star Trek has always been pretty clear, like, yes. Yes, they are. Should we tolerate them? Yes.
The whole thing with Data from the beginning is about slavery and freedom, and that's really his main thing and what it is to be
measure of a man
sort of thing. And that was the whole point of it. It's very, you know, not subtle. The court episode or Data's Day, the episode, it's not subtle that it's you know, that it's political. But with the future of Star Trek, then, as we said, that we're both worried about the future of Star Trek. And I get some people saying to me, Star Trek will never end, it'll always go, don't be, you know, you're an idiot saying that. And I'm like,
I hope they're right.
Remember the end? Well, do you remember the end of Enterprise? Because it's happened before. What I'm being told is that that's what Skydancer may be thinking. And I will emphasize really quickly, as far as I know, no decision has been made.
Yeah.
So we're looking at some hints of things that I've been told. And again, like you mentioned earlier, I've got to be so careful of agendas because I get a lot of stuff that's
the one thing that you know, because I wrote an article based on your one video about the and that's just because I will take every chance I get to tell Star Trek fans to not make the mistake I did with Enterprise. Don't think that this is guaranteed. Like, the fact that Star Trek still exists is because this show and the fans, led by women fans, by the way, Bijou Trimble, the other names have just slipped my head. They were right at the tip of my tongue. But they all, like, they are the reason we have conventions. They're the reason we have modern fandom as it is. They saved the show. So, like, Star Trek defies the odds. TNG was not supposed to work because until that time, no show that was a sequel, because they had made sequel shows, like Mission Impossible had a sequel show with the same cast, Peter Graves and some of the people from the original cast. Mission Impossible, like a couple weeks younger than Star Trek. Paramount's two oldest and two most profitable franchises. Mission Impossible came back, bombed. No sequel series ever outperformed its successor until TNG. And then DS9 happened, and you know, they were like, you can't do Star Trek twice because it's the same, it's going to be the same show. And they're like, no, it isn't. We're going to do something completely different. And it was divisive, but it brought in people who were like, oh, I don't really go for this ship stuff. I like this war DS9 stuff. And it expanded the fan base.
Very different show. Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's what, if that's the mistake that Paramount has made and that Skydance may be making, is not putting the new Star Trek. You know, keep the old stuff behind your Paramount paywall. People will show up for that, sure. Yeah. But put this new stuff everywhere you can. It should be on Pluto TV. It should be on their Paramount channel. It should be on CBS on the weekends or whatever. Like, as many people who you can, like, because people will find it and they'll be like, oh, what is this? And then, you know, that is how Star Trek works. Now, I also think they're too cheap to pay the residuals for airing it on the cable and on the Pluto and stuff like that. Paramount has had serious money problems. And, you know, the one thing from your video, the reason I mentioned that is speaking of agendas, I do wonder if that isn't a negotiation tactic in a way, like you know what I mean? Or just the idea that Skydance is like, hey, making stuff is what we do, you know, because Skydance, were they part of Into Darkness or just Beyond?
Into Darkness as well, weren't they? I think.
Yeah, so that actually, that shows that Skydance and Kurtzman and them could work together. So,
well, they've also done. Kurtzman worked on a few of the Mission Impossibles as well. So Skydance and they know. I've actually been told, but then this feels like an agenda comment to me.
Yeah,
that it's because they know Kurtzman that they don't want to work with him. But
I mean,
like that all the time.
You know, the deal. I remember reading the Variety article about the deal he got, and I was like, for Star Trek,
he got a hell of a good deal for Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, but that was also, I mean, think about that was like the same time JJ Abrams got that like huge, massive deal, and I don't know, has he made anything?
He never made anything.
So
he kept pitching stuff that just never got made. I mean, part of it was COVID, to be fair.
Part of it was COVID, part of it was the merger. You know what I mean? Like it's and that's the other thing too. Mergers are tricky business. And with it being delayed and the fact that, you know, as an American citizen, I will say that I believe my government is extorting Paramount with this lawsuit.
100%,
you know,
they are.
I think that
they're not even being subtle about it.
Yeah, it's pure intimidation. The FCC is threatening CBS's broadcast license. It's unconscionable. And it's going to be costly.
So one thing I would argue as well is that it makes it very, very clear that Trump personally is trying to extort him, not just the fact that he's extorted everybody else, including, you know.
Oh, now you're going to get in trouble, Jay. Oh,
Facebook, I am going to get in trouble with this. He should have gone to the FCC and made a complaint if he was genuinely wasn't just after the money, but he didn't. He went and started legal action. One of the main FCC things that they're supposed to do is deal with complaints.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do that. He didn't go anywhere near the FCC. He just made a civil action against them and asked for like £2 billion, which is just stupid. Any other situation, particularly after, I spoke to a lawyer, an industry lawyer about this, Hollywood lawyer, and he basically said, they've got no case because he won the election. So how are they going to prove damages? He didn't. If he'd have lost, he might have had a case, but he didn't. He won, so he's got no case. But the fact, I was actually talking to a cast member of Strange New Worlds about this because I basically said one of the reasons why Strange New Worlds was delayed, I was told, was they were re-editing bits because they wanted to make it less political in just bits. And they basically said Akiva Goldsman would never go for that ever. And I'm like, yeah, in a normal circumstance, you might not. But when you've got Paramount phoning him up going, the existence of the company is literally at risk. And we know they did it with 60 Minutes. That the lady, that was running it quit because she said it's corporate interference. They're telling me what I can and can't do, and I'm not having that in a news network. So my point is, we're not living in a normal world right now.
Sure.
The FCC is
the merger thing.
The way it should.
The merger again. If there was no merger, I 100% believe that Paramount would, you know, even with their troubles, would be like, yeah, see you in court, buddy. But the merger was supposed to be done this month, if I'm not mistaken, right? Wasn't
it was supposed to be done first quarter, which would be April, May, June.
Okay, so I thought like June, July was what they said
basically, about now, basically. And the thing is though, when I've read reports about it, the FCC haven't even basically started a lot of the stuff they're supposed to do. That like the process, it's just stuck.
I think they're trying to. I think the plan is to time it out and make the merger fall through.
Yeah, well, I think as soon as they give him his 25 million quid that apparently they've offered, I think this merger will go through very quickly.
That also could happen too.
But,
it's crazy stuff, and it is very. That is Star Trek trying to operate in a Star Wars world, to put it in allegorical terms.
Yeah, it is crazy, but
you know, you did, you know, we do still have, if they put it out, stuff that's coming. The, you know, Strange New World season 3. I'm excited for that. I don't think your frustration is going to be alleviated as much. I mean, you're right that from the trailers, it looks like we're getting a couple quirky episodes and so, you know.
I hate the Gorn as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a strong suspicion that they are going to put that to bed this season in a way that will make people who don't mind it and people who do mind it satisfied in one way or the other. I mean, I admit that one, that is pretty much, talk of like canon problems. That's pretty much the biggest one. The whole thing with Khan, I thought that was brilliant. The way that they were like, oh, the Time War, changed things, but things, I hate to use the term canon event from like the Spider-Verse movies, but it's such a good term, because that is what it is. Khan is a canon event, and they just pushed it in such a way so that it fits better with the Star Trek timeline, because when they said the 1990s, they thought we were going to have spaceships that could do what the Botany Bay could do in the 1990s.
The Jetsons by then, didn't they?
Yeah. So I thought that was great. But the thing about Spock coming face to face with a Gorn, I don't know how you get around that in Arena.
No.
Like,
well, I always said that they made the Gorn like a xenomorph from Aliens, and I mean, even though they made it, it's just that's how they did it. But
I would love series finale of Strange New Worlds. The Gorn come back and they just look like the Arena guy. They're like, "That's a Gorn? What happened?
Yeah.
Did they change?"
I'd love it. Yeah, that'd be good.
The other thing that would be funny is if it was Trelane and he comes in and he's like, "The Gorn, you should know about them."
Yeah, they could get away with a lot of things there. But I think they've tried to make him really scary and did the thing, and I don't think they're a good villain. It's the thing about a good show and a great show is the villain. That's why I would actually argue Strange New Worlds is just a good show. It can't be a great show unless they do something in season 3.
Well, see, I feel like Star Trek is not that. Like because Star Trek, the villains, even the Klingons, they weren't in the original series as much as people thought.
No,
and
a couple of episodes, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, same thing with the Borg in Next Gen.
Yeah,
I mean, Voyager really went
Five
Borg heavy.
Episodes?
Yeah. You had the Hughes stuff, and that's about it. I mean, Star Trek is the thing about Star Trek is it doesn't need the villain. Like the villain becomes your friend, or the villain is a problem to solve, not to defeat. Like that's when I think Star Trek. But that's also very hard. Like that's why, Maurice Hurley, when he was running the show, he did cop shows. He's like, you get the bad guy, you shoot him. Like he couldn't reconcile. What did he call it? God, he had a term that he used in Chaos of the Bridge. To make fun of sort of like Gene Roddenberry's vision, like I can't remember what it was, but it was real disrespectful in a way, like just like absolute like nonsense, basically. And that's I think if Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy, if they do that, like if they don't try to give us a big villain, it'll hit a little better with fans.
I don't think Starfleet Academy can really. It's not really what the show's. What I understand about it, what it's about. Yeah. So it shouldn't really do that, but we'll see. You never know what they're going to do with these shows at the moment. And
I will say this: if I'm fine with using release order and time travel to justify any canon conflicts. Like, oh, that's some time travel stuff that changed because we saw how the timeline changes in yesterday's Enterprise and tomorrow and tomorrow. It just and you never know. So how many times has that happened when we have to people who weren't in our shows?
When time travel's so easy, it's just flipping around the sun.
It's just flipping around the sun. You just jump through a black hole. That's how that works. So I'm fine with that. But if it gets in your way, we got the multiverse, man. Just pretend it's a different universe. Who cares? It's not the Prime timeline. It's the Prime timeline plus. It's the Prime video timeline. Whatever it takes to have fun.
I come at it from a slightly different angles. I sometimes feel it's a cop-out, and I do think in times in New Trek they've made a mistake and then they've tried to retro fit it afterwards and sort of gone, we didn't really make a mistake, we did it because of this. And I'm just like, it's just a cop-out sometimes. I just think actually if you hadn't made the mistake in the first place, that would have been better.
I'll tell you what, as much as we love this stuff, put us in charge and try to have us do this stuff and not make the mistakes. We'll make the mistakes all the time.
You're going to make mistakes. But also, I do agree. I will say canon is important to a point. And then it's like, we can probably come up with a million different episodes when you go, well, why did they do this? And to make the story happen.
Yeah.
Or why didn't they should have known this because of this, this, and this. Because that was the thing in Picard season 3. I forget what it was now, but Picard should have known. It was something to do with the best of both worlds while Picard was Locutus. and he didn't know about it. And I'm like, he never read the mission reports. He should have known. It doesn't make any sense. But it needed to make the story happen. So, you know, it's like sometimes you just got to go, all right, but there's a line. I just think New Trek sometimes is just like danced up to the line and go, no. And sometimes I just feel like they're almost trying to do it on purpose to wind us up. But
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I the way I look at it, especially, you know, just in certain things, is I feel like they are mistakes in that they're like, oh, people are gonna love this, and people don't love it. Like they it's a thing that they think is a nod to the fans that they're doing to be respectful. But you know how Star Trek fans are gonna Star Trek fan. We're gonna be like, nuh-uh, that's not how that goes.
Section 31, we saw the character with black and white face. And everyone's there going, he should be dead.
Yeah.
He shouldn't exist.
That's right.
What's going on?
Well, how do we not know? Maybe those two guys on the planet reconciled their differences. Obviously, that's an asexual reproduction. Yeah, they had a baby. That's their son. That's their boy.
Yeah, okay. That's Christian's going to be so angry at you.
That wouldn't be the first time.
No. Do you think if you had to put money on it, again, a phase of your head, do you think Kurtzman will get an extension to this deal?
I think it all really will depend on what happens with the merger. If the merger can go through and it doesn't cost, like if it's not super costly, because after a merger, debt management is the biggest thing that any company has to work. I have been so harsh on David Zaslav and the Warner Brothers thing, because, you know, Warner Brothers, it's one of our classic studios, so many things that we love. And he has made he's a reality TV guy, and he sees, you know, Sister Wives and The Godfather as the same thing. You know, they're on a level. And so, but a lot of the decisions that they made, stupid as they were, it was because they had to manage their debt, or, you know, the company was going to be in severe trouble.
Billion,
some crazy number. Like billion. It's just so many billions that it's imaginary to me. Like it's not even real. And I feel like that, I'm sure that, because Skydance is putting in what, like, I think it's like 8 billion total, but only
8
like
billion initial investment. They owe 16.
But like, but I think only like 2 billion's going into the company, or the debt or something. Like there's going to be a lot of debt management stuff that's going to have to happen.
So my understanding is they've got a lot of fat they want to cut.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, they want a lot of studio space that they're just going to that needs updating, needs money spending on it, so they'll just sell it. And then they'll use that money to hopefully invest in a small. But they're going to be doing a far more focused.
So I would say this. Like, remember how they were going to sell Paramount Plus to like NBC or something, and then all of a sudden Paramount Plus turned a profit, and they're like, oh, maybe we'll hold on to this. Yeah. So if in the next, like, in the time that it takes for this to finalize, if like Strange New Worlds does well, maybe Starfleet Academy hits, brings in the type of new viewers they want, maybe Kurtzman gets some kind of extension, maybe not an exclusivity deal. But if it's about debt management and they're just in dire straits, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mission Impossible and Star Trek go to bed for, like you said, 5, maybe even 10 years. Yeah. Just as a way to save money.
What I feel they're doing, or my feeling is that they won't extend it, from what I've heard and told. But they will probably push with a couple of movies. And they'll basically try to do what we did. Well, basically, when Enterprise ended, we'll get a couple of movies, and then they'll try to build a bit of excitement, and they'll come back with something new. That's how I feel they're going. But I've always said to people, I think the longer the merger goes on, the more likely it is that they may give him an extension, because I think they'll get to a point where they're like, our choice is basically to do nothing with Star Trek.
Oh, so like a year extension or something to cover the
give
gap.
A couple of year extension. Maybe do 2 seasons of Strange New Worlds. Maybe go beyond season 5 of Strange New Worlds or something, if that's still really popular. Just give us 2 more. Just give us a 3rd and 4th season of Academy.
From your lips to the God of Shakari's ears.
Yeah, well, and they could do that, couldn't they? Just give us something. And I tell you what, if you've got an animated idea, let's give this bloody workplace comedy a go and see if people go for that or not. They may do that. Just give them a 2-year deal.
I'll tell you what, Tawny Newsome, the stuff she says, she sounds like a nerd. Like, she sounds like she really knows the stuff.
She knows the Star Trek. I think she makes references, and I'm like,
I mean, the commentary of like the commentary on Lower Decks, like she'll make references in the commentary separate from the references being made in the show. And we didn't talk about how great Lower Decks was enough, because Mike McMahon took this silly little comedy and every single episode became more and more like real Star Trek until like it was one of the most Star Trek shows out there. You know, it's amazing. It was,
I worry about a workplace comedy show because it's going to be live action, and I've always said that. As far as then, that's properly in canon then, and I'm a bit concerned about how they do the tone of the comedy is different. Yeah, because I always argue people are funny. I don't like dramas when they go, oh, it's so realistic, and I'm like, well, no, because nobody cracked a single joke. Everyone, and particularly British people, the worse something happens is the more we take the piss. You know, it's just like, so I always think that no, in realism there would be humor because that's real life. So it depends how they do the tone of it, but I always said that Lower Decks could do that and could be silly and because it was animated, so you could separate it a little bit from the live action. So in my nerd brain I'm like, oh yeah, but it's animated. It's okay.
Lower Decks could have run for 10 years. Like, again, I don't know what Paramount's thinking. Like, Mike McMahon and them, they were a well-oiled machine. I think it was the most consistently produced Star Trek, like without gaps and stuff, which of course, because it's animation, it's just writing, recording, animating. Which I make sound super easy. It's challenging, but it's much more of a factory kind of situation. And the quality did not suffer. You know, and you know, I also think that a lot of it is the fact that we are currently in, just like we were currently when we were in the Berman era, people were entrenched in their opinions. I think because we are in the Kurtzman era, people are entrenched in their opinions. If Star Trek does go away, I think the only bright side will be, apparently counter to what the opinion is in the poll, I think that it will cause a reevaluation of the Kurtzman era of Star Trek, because people who love Star Trek, right now, we are waiting for Star Trek Legacy, this idealized show that is the perfect show for us that doesn't actually exist and probably never will. And then what'll happen is when we have no more new Star Trek, you will get to Acceptance. You will go back and look at Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Picard. Like, there's so many more options even than before. Prodigy, that you will then find the Star Trek you like, and there will be a reappraisal. I think that will happen. And in fact, when they bring back, if they take it away and then bring it back in like 10 years, it'll be Star Trek Legacy for real this time. And people are like, what is this? This isn't like the real Star Trek from the like Discovery. This isn't like the real Star Trek, like Lower Decks. What are you talking like? Because it happens with Star Wars. I mean, I remember Return of the Jedi was the bad Star Wars movie. Then the prequels came out, and nope, that's the Holy Trilogy. And then the sequels came out, and all of a sudden, everything George Lucas did was a genius and gold and a pure vision. And now that's, you know, and then, you know, so I feel that there is a cyclical nature to it. It's about fan expectations. And in many places, there is a bad faith element that we talked about. But I think a lot of it is like a people are like, I want to love this and I don't. And it's and reconciling that feeling, you either do and you grow to like it, or you don't. And that honestly breaks my heart. If there was a new Star Trek that I really didn't like, that I just sincerely did not enjoy, I'd be so sad. It would break my heart.
Actually, that's how I feel about not all of Discovery. I'm not going to sit here and say some people hate it. It's an abomination. I'm not. No, there are episodes with Giorgio and things I loved. There was episodes that storylines I really enjoyed and stuff. I'm not going to sit and I'm not going to sit
season
and say
5. It felt like a like a movie. It felt like the old movies.
Season 5. Yeah,
I mean, again, you're right. The end bit was a
it did go.
I mean, they went for something, but you know,
they missed badly. That whole it wanted to tie into that whole shorts episode, and it's just like, no, it didn't work for me. But anyway, I don't think I'll ever look back fondly on Discovery. I think I will look back fondly on Strange New Worlds, even though it frustrates me at times. And I will continue watching Lower Decks. I think I that's become one of my things that I watch every so often now. I've got like a handful of shows I watch. I watched Firefly over and over again. I watched a show called Boston Legal, which actually Bill Shatner was in.
Heck yeah, I know about Boston Legal. James, we love James Spader in this
David
house.
Kelly. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that. So every couple of years I watch that, and Lower Decks will be in that. Every so often I'll be like, I'm binging Lower Decks.
Yeah.
And Prodigy probably, to be fair. But I just hope Starfleet Academy is something I can enjoy.
Alexa, remind me in 10 years to ask Jay if he has reappraised Starfleet Discovery or Star Trek Discovery, because I don't know, man.
Alexa off.
Yeah.
Woman, we're live.
I muted mine before I said that. But no, I mean, we'll see. Like, I guarantee you that there were things that you like now that was Star Trek that you would have never guessed 10, 15 years ago. You'd be like, that's actually not that bad.
And I can't say it won't happen, because it happened with Enterprise.
Yeah.
I didn't love it at the time when I watched back. As a Stargater, I did not like SGU, and I look back on it now, and I'm not going to say I love it, but I can appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
And how many times have you been to the cinema expecting a movie to be this, and then it's not, and you come out disappointed, but then you watch it a couple of years later, and it's like, no, this is a good film. What was my problem with this?
It's funny
as well.
I got spoiled for The Force Awakens. There were people who were mad about it, and they were just putting spoilers out on the internet, and they were just saying, Kylo Ren kills his father, Han Solo. Luke is in it for one scene.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, if I hadn't seen that before I saw the movie, I might not have felt the same way about Force Awakens. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, because it tempered my expectations. Yeah. I thought that, my expectations, I went in there knowing what I was going to get. And so I was able to take it in on its merits, and not just because, again, back then I wasn't even a critic. I was just a nerd. I was just a fan. So I wasn't even trying to be judicious, and criticism is, of course, all based on opinion. Sometimes it's based on argument. You know what I mean? Like,
a lot of the times, preconceptions, what you think it's going to be as well.
Like if someone were to say, like, if you, I'm sure that this is something that maybe you even feel about some of these shows, but if you were to say, like, I don't like this season of the Kurtzman Star Trek, unassailable comment, nothing I can say. It invites a conversation, not an argument.
Yeah.
But if you were to say that this season of the Kurtzman Star Trek does not contain any of the themes or motifs used in previous Star Trek, or something like that, some sort of argument-based thing, like, unless you come with that evidence, you're kind of just talking noise. Like, that's what I try to do as a critic. Like, if you were to say, read my book, The Divided Allegiance, The Third Waves of Star Wars and Star Trek, available on Amazon now. If you were to read that, you would find, hey, there it is. You would find Scott, I just noticed the Scott Bakula and the Alex Kurtzman. I don't know why that comparison is. It's just so silly to me. And Logan, my long lost lab.
We need to be adding the links to the description.
But I, the stuff that I try to do in there is I try to make arguments based upon, some of it's my opinion and my feeling as a fan, and then some of it is me trying to make an argument based upon the content of the show. Like, there are some things I talk about, I think, for like Discovery Season 2 and Discovery Season 3 especially, because in Discovery Season 3, I really felt like the show came into its own. Like, it was able to escape the shadow of the past, and it was able to sort of chart its own course to be sort of on the nose in a way we Americans like and British people don't. But no, I think that it was I try to make the case so that people can at least understand where we're coming. You don't have to agree. Maybe it'll make you see it differently. Maybe it won't, but at least you'll understand why people who do like it. And the thing that really worries me, and if I have any message to the fans, the people in the chat here who I've seen have very negative things to say about Discovery and Kurtzman Trek, which is fine.
Yeah.
I just remember when I was a kid going on to the early internet and talking about how I thought DS9 was cool, and it wasn't, being told it wasn't real Star Trek. None of those fans were like, you're not a real Star Trek fan. You are not welcome. They were like, oh, DS9's bullshit. You want to watch Star Trek? You got to see the original series. And I'm like, oh, I watched the original. Like,
that's
whether, I mean, I've spoken to fans who've reached out to me. They're like, I'm a fan of this new stuff, and I don't feel welcome in like Star Trek Reddit. And I'm like, well, no one's welcome in Star Trek Reddit. But like,
Yeah, particularly us. But like, I really worry that like we're not Star Wars fans, for God's sakes. Like, come on. The one thing about Star Trek, if there is any fundamental principle that we can all agree on, is that it is an open community. Like, if you like one episode of Discovery, if you like just Spock's brain, if the only music you listen to is Faith of the Heart, you are a Star Trek fan and you are part of the group. And just so long, remember, attack. You can not like the shows. You can say the shows are bad, but just, don't attack the people. Don't make the people feel unwelcome. And that's the only thing that I would like to say about.
And Brent Spiner, I think. I can't remember which interview it was, but I think he said it exactly like you're saying there. That Brent Spiner sort of said, "Look, there's a lot of hate and stuff towards Star Trek," and they're like, "How are you a Star Trek fan and complaining that this show is woke or that there's a transgender character in the episode? How do you not get the point of Star Trek? It's about inclusion. It's about..."
And that's why I love what you guys do here at SciTrek, because obviously we disagree about a number of these shows, but we've had a great conversation. We've gone 15 minutes over longer than we were supposed to, because we're having so much fun. And it's even in your criticism of the show, you're always very clear about what you like and what you don't like. I don't think I've ever heard you say that like the people who like Discovery have bad taste, or something like that. Like,
other than when I said Section 31.
Well, I mean, look, that's fair. I honestly, I have that coming. If you didn't say that, I would question your sanity.
I
but no, that's
everything with the attitude that it's opinion. There's a lot of opinion, and there's somebody get in the comments. It's their opinion. They're entitled to it. All I ever ask is, if you've got an opinion, explain to me why.
Yeah.
And I say that in shows, politics, everything. I think you're entitled to any opinion you want. But if you can't articulate why, then you're just feeling it. You're not thinking about it. And
some opinions
need to think.
Some opinions aren't right or wrong. Some opinions can be wrong. If I were to say Star Trek is a show about a boy and his dog having adventures on the frontier, that's my opinion. It's wrong. It's just not true. But if I were to say that, like, I think that, I like Star Trek Discovery the best or whatever, that's an opinion that, what you like and what you don't like can't be wrong. And I think that we have a lot of fun debating stuff, and that's part of the fun too. Like, talking about which Star Trek is shit and which Star Trek isn't is part of the fun if you're respectful about it. I did think we did lose something, though. I do remember there used to be a thing where we would try to make stuff fit canon when it didn't, rather than saying, oh, they got Star Trek wrong. Now, as we got more Star Trek and more canon, I feel like that it's the same thing with Star Wars now. You just know too much that you don't have to do that. Like, it's like, oh, we haven't been told that, so it didn't happen, And I think that's where a lot of the canon
stuff does happen quite a lot. And fans make excuses for them, don't they? Oh, it wasn't that, though. It was this. And blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm like, you make an excuse for a mistake there. Just let it go. Or try to do stuff, trying to create a background for something when it is just to make the story happen. You don't have to go do that. They did it so that this bit made sense. Or so they could get to this end bit.
Oh, can I tell you? All right.
So they can make a silly joke or something.
So you don't think I'm all praise and kind of, do you know what I think the dumbest thing in Discovery Season 1 is? The stupid bit with the lights and the eyes. What? That doesn't make any, like, that has nothing to do with the mirror universe. I mean, now again, you can make it fit like, oh, maybe these crew members, they saw a thing and they have the eye sensitivity. It's not, but that was just to do their dumb cards down storytelling to make people think like, oh, wait, is Lorca from the, we should have known from the get-go that Lorca was from the mirror universe. We didn't have to know why. We didn't have to know what he was doing. But if we knew that right up front, people would have understood why Discovery was so different.
He should have had a mustache, and then we'd have known
a goatee.
He was evil twin. That's all we needed.
I love that bit because, again, goatee Spock, only guy not evil in the Mirror episode.
Yeah.
Which Discovery did with goatee Sarek. They had goatee Sarek, and he was also not evil.
Oh, I tell you the one thing, Harris, you can jump back in when you're ready, mate. I think we're about to make a good night. Do you know the one thing that disappoints that the only thing about Star Trek I ever look back on and I think, oh, I'm gutted about that, It was that we didn't get that last season or that next season of Enterprise. One, we'd have got the refit, which is
that was Doug Drexler threw down with that design. I have my Eagle Moss one right in front of my face. I'd pull it out, but I don't want to mess up my arrangement.
I've got the model stored away somewhere because I nearly broke it when I moved. But the main thing is apparently they were going to do, I don't know if the whole season was, but they were going to do a big chunks of Mirror Universe episodes. And I love the Mirror Universe episodes.
Oh, in the Mirror Darkly.
I'm so gutted we didn't get that.
Yeah. I mean, Manny Koto, especially now that he's gone, like it would have been so great for him to get one more season to get the Federation. And, you know, I love the way that Frakes has talked about the finale and the way that he admitted that like they went for something and it didn't play the way they wanted it to.
Yeah.
And
I've always said though, end of series or end of season episode, brilliant.
Yeah.
End of the very last episode, it made no sense because it was too much about Jonathan Frakes or about Riker and Troy.
Yeah, making a decision we saw Riker make 15 years ago.
It made no sense. And the whole thing that we wanted the show to be about, the creation of the Federation, even in that bloody episode, we don't see it and it's in the bloody background. I'm like, oh, for God's sake.
What was the I was watching I got, of course, because I'm a Star Trek fan, I bought the whole series on DVD even before I knew I actually really loved it. And I was watching the talk with Berman and Braga where they were, or maybe it was the cast, where Braga mentions, he's like, someone said, well, we should have heard Archer's speech. And he went, oh, I never thought of that. Which,
it's a seminal moment in the Federation. That just put the whole series in a nutshell for me. Just like, oh, why did you do that?
So let me ask you this, Jay. Does the appearance of the retrofit NX-01 in Picard season 3 mean that the holo recording that Riker and Troy watched was inaccurate because the NX-01 was not the refit and it was the end of their...
Ooh. Are you suggesting that Star Trek writers made an error?
I'm suggesting that whoever put that refit in there was like, we are going to undo the end of Enterprise and Trip's death.
Yeah.
Very subtly. Because who's to say the holo people got it right?
Yeah. And let's say, and Trip's death is one of the most hated moments.
Oh, truly one of the worst ideas of all time. There is that book that people love where it's like he was pulled out to do some like deep cover Romulan mission or something.
Yeah. No, I've never read any of the books, but I have read that one. I read all of William Shatner's books and really
loved the Return of Kirk books. Yeah, I read them.
I love those books, but no, I've never been a bit. And like you said, I had to read your book. I don't read. The only books I've ever read from beginning to end is a couple of Star Trek books and the Harry Potters. Other than that,
yeah, I like the Star Trek comics. I think the Star Trek comics they do a fun job.
The Cisco one, following the thing. I thought that was so clever.
Yeah, I think part of the reason I kind of am soft on the Kelvinverse is because they did a series where they redid like TOS episodes in comics with those characters. And like they looked like the people. So like it was like, because I think that's the problem with those movies too. Like if they were going to do the original series, they should have just done a prequel to The Man Trap, or where No Man Has Gone Before, whatever the first chronological episode is, because then they would have been the characters that we knew. That by changing their history and changing the characters and then not giving us a TV show where we got to spend time with them, like you just didn't get enough time to know these characters. Like they weren't our Spock, our Kirk, whatever, but we didn't get to know that Spock. And by the way, Zachary Quinto, the Yinzer Spock from Pittsburgh, my hometown. That's what I represent for all Pittsburgh people.
There you go. Zachary Quinto is perfectly cast as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. I never really liked Chris Pine's casting. I liked Chris Pine.
Yeah,
I never really thought he was Kirk. I didn't think it made sense, but Zachary Quinto was brilliant.
Zoe Saldana.
Yeah, fantastic. Even though I'm not sure she really fit the character, but I just love her. So, the chap that passed away that played
Anton Yelchin.
He was amazing. Sulu,
absolutely.
How they got to do Sulu was amazing.
Simon Pegg.
As well, Carl Urban as Bones.
Oh my God,
Carl Urban in everything. But
I mean, I'll tell you what, he's the one that feels the most like the original. Like he wasn't doing DeForest Kelly, but it felt like DeForest Kelly.
Yeah. It just worked. Yeah. Chris Pine was the only one I thought was slightly badly cast. If I'm
Chris
honest.
Pine did all right. And there was every so often he would hit you with a very Shatner line reading. Like there's a couple times where he'd be like, Bones.
It was good. But anyway, this has been absolutely marvelous. I've got to eat and I've got to pee.
Yeah, I know.
It's an ongoing joke in our channel that at some point I will end the video just because I need a wee.
Yeah.
They've said that I should get a
need the loo
and put the SciTrek logo on it, sort of thing. But no, this is amazing. Can I invite you back when either, I don't know, maybe halfway through season 3 of Strange New Worlds, or definitely at the end anyway.
Absolutely.
I'd love to.
We'll maybe have a chat about season 3 of Strange New Worlds. I think that'd be good. And then you can explain to me why I'm wrong when I get annoyed about some episode.
Sure. And I will say this, on the 17th of June, it's going to premiere at Tribeca, and a spoiler-free review will hit CBR.com. I do not have a YouTube channel. I sling my words. You can find me on my Amazon book page. You can find my books there. CBR.com. You Google Joshua M. Patten. That should come up. I'm also at Joshua M. Patten on pretty much every social app. You can find me there. Open DMs, always down to talk Star Wars, Star Trek. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Thank you so much for having me, Jay. This has been an absolute delight. I knew we'd have a great conversation like this. And I truly love talking to people who don't think how I do about Star Trek, because like stories are empathy engines, and learning, getting to see how other people see the things make you have more empathy, I think. And it's one of my favorite things about this fandom.
Having these debates as well, you've changed my mind on a couple of things. I have not changed it. But no, there's a couple of times today you've gone, oh bloody, of course I'll let that go then. But that's how debate is supposed to be. Or how boring would it be if we just agreed? This would be this video wouldn't be pushing 2.5 hours if we all just went, Star Trek's great, isn't it?
It's pretty good. Star Trek great, isn't it?
Well, we all agree. I will always say actually that when I moan about Star Trek, guys, I'm moaning because I love it.
Yeah.
I would not care otherwise, and I would not be doing videos about it.
That's the other thing I would caution your viewers to just, we talk about media literacy. Jay is someone when you talk about Star Wars, I hear that you're a person who loves it, or Star Trek. You're a person who loves it and aren't happy with what you're getting, and that is your personal feeling. You are not those people who are going to hate the new thing regardless. That the bad faith, negative engagement. We've got to learn the difference, because those people need to be sent out into the Delphic expanse and left to float out there yelling into the void.
Out,
the real Star Trek fans. The people the sincere Star Trek fans, the ones who come at it from good faith, we can disagree and still talk to each other and also still watch everything, because that's kind of how we do it. Like Star Trek, people hate watch 2 seasons of TNG before it got good. Like the ratings were still high.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we realized how good it was going to get, because I will always say that that mean. All Star Trek is great, even the bad Star Trek, bad Star Trek, and I don't quite agree with that, because they released Subspace Rhapsody. But I would say this about Stargate, Battlestar Galactica, not so much. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but Star Trek and everything else, there is no bad of that show, because I still think it's better than 90% of everything that's off the screen. So even when I watch one I don't like particularly, I'm like, I'd still rather watch that than bloody Love Island or something.
I'll say that, like, even the worst Star Trek is 40% better than most good things.
Yeah, that's fair.
That aren't Star Trek.
I remember somebody saying, "What's your least favorite Firefly episode?" And I'm like, "There isn't one. What are you talking about? It's stupid. What a stupid question." And I was like, Anyway, no, it has been amazing.
I'll tell you, it's the end of Serenity. That's my least favorite Firefly episode.
That it ended at all. Yes. Is my least favorite. But no, this has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll see if Harris is actually listening now, and can he actually end the episode when we both say goodbye. This is good. Or we're going to be sat here awkwardly staring, waiting for him to
just being quiet, blinking.
Yeah.
Thank you, chat, by the way, for watching. And
yeah, we have some brilliant people in the chat. Always got an opinion as well. So
what if Harris went to the loo?
He probably has. He's probably just fell asleep. Or the cleaning lady's there. Apparently there's a cleaning lady that was coming. Oh, there's music. He's playing some music or something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's on the ball. Thank you so much, bud. And good night, everybody.
Yeah,
thank you so much again for being in
the
comments.
Good afternoon, Americans.
Yeah, we will see Joshua again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Go on, Harris. Now!